The night shift had been running for 6 hours when the ocean finally went quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet you get out on the Pacific. This was deeper, heavier, like something huge had settled over the water and pressed all the sound out of the air. Even after 12 years on the job, I had never heard anything like it. And I had heard a lot, storms that sounded like the sky was tearing open, metal grinding against reef, whales calling under the hull like ghosts humming through the water. But this silence was worse because it felt intentional. My name is Roar Barrowman, and I had been fishing long enough to know that the sea has moods. Some nights she's loud, angry, unpredictable. Some nights she's calm and still like she's sleeping. But every once in a while she gets quiet in a way that feels wrong, like she's watching, like she's waiting. That was the kind of night it was. The winch motor gave its steady hum behind me. The cold Pacific wind crawled across the deck with that damp bite that seeps straight into your bones. We were working far off the coast, too far to see land even in daylight, deep enough that the water under us just kept going and going until pressure crushed anything dumb enough to stray too far down. Eldon Vickery was in the cabin, hunched over the radio panel. The glow from the console washed over his face in a pale green color, making him look a little sick. Keen Marita, our deckhand, paced the lines with his lantern, checking knots, checking clips, checking everything the same way he always did. His lantern swung back and forth, casting long shadows that dragged across the deck like stretched-out arms. It was close to 3:00 a.m., the hour every fisherman secretly hates. Something about it is different. Maybe it's the darkness. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's the way your brain starts drifting in and out of tired thoughts. Or maybe it's the fact that most accidents at sea happen right around that time. People lose focus, equipment slips, the ocean gets bold. Retrieval starts in an hour, Eldon called from the cabin. He stuck his head out through the door, cigarette smoke leaking around him. Sonar shows good bottom here, depth S around 800. I nodded, routine, no surprises, the kind of night you hope for. But even as I thought that, something about the silence sat heavy in the back of my mind. The gulls weren't circling. The wind wasn't shifting. The waves weren't even whispering, just darkness pressing around the deck, our lamps cutting tiny holes in it. Sometimes you wonder what's outside that circle of light. What's sitting out there in the dark watching you work? Sometimes you think about it too much and wish you hadn't. The sonar beeped suddenly. Not the normal soft blip we were used to. This one was sharp, metallic, too loud. It cut through the quiet like a knife and made all three of us freeze for half a second. I stepped into the cabin. The screen showed a school of fish, normal shapes, normal movement, nothing strange, but the sound wasn't normal. "You hear that?" Eldon asked, tapping the side of the monitor like that would fix whatever was wrong. "Yeah, but sonar looks clean." Keen joined us, pulling his jacket tighter. His breath came out in little white puffs. "Maybe the belt on the drum's loose," he said. "Sometimes makes weird sounds." It made sense, so we shrugged it off and got ready to bring the net up. At first everything worked exactly how it should. The winch groaned, the drum spun, the line tightened, and the net began rising out of the blackness like a ghost slowly climbing up from a grave. The usual routine. Then everything stopped. The drum froze. The motor kept humming, but the cable locked so fast the boat jerked to the side. Metal strained. The winch shuddered. The whole deck rattled under my boots. "Stop, stop," Eldon shouted. He slammed the motor off. For a moment the only sound was the water tapping against the hull. Keen looked at the drum, then the line. "Not the belt," he said quietly. "Cables are clean, something S got it." "Got it how?" I asked. He shrugged. "Wreck, rock spike, maybe debris. Something down there snagged us." Before I could respond, Eldon stared at the sonar again. His face went still. "Depth bottom is 820, he said. "Our nets were up at 150. We all stared at him, which didn't make sense. If the net wasn't anywhere near the bottom, then what the hell was it caught on? Keen pointed to the sonar screen, his finger shaking just slightly. What's that?" Below the bright fish signal, something else showed up. A dense, dark mass, huge, not moving, just sitting there like a shadow made of metal. "What is that?" I whispered. Eldon leaned closer. "No clue, could be a whale." "Whales don't stay still," Keen muttered. We watched the screen for a long moment. The mass didn't shift, didn't pulse, didn't drift, nothing, just a dark, heavy shape miles from any known structure. "Try again," Eldon finally said. "Slow, see if whatever's got the line gives." Keen and I took our positions. Eldon hit the motor at minimum power. The drum creaked and turned, the cable pulling tight like a rope tied to a mountain. The boat leaned hard to one side. Nothing moved. Then suddenly the net shifted, not upward, sideways. The cable angle changed. The tension lines twitched in a way I'd never seen. The net wasn't stuck. It was being pulled in a direction the winch wasn't pulling. "That's not right," I said. "Cut the power," Eldon said immediately. He shut it off. The wind died completely. The ocean flattened in a way that didn't feel natural. Everything was still. Keen swallowed hard. "We need to cut the net loose." "Yeah," Eldon said, voice tight. "We might lose the boat otherwise." But before he could grab the emergency shears, the sonar let out a low, deep tone. One I had never heard, not from any fish, not from any machine. The sound was so strange that it didn't feel like it came from the speaker. It felt like it came from the air itself, vibrating through the cabin walls and into my chest. The mass on the sonar moved, just a little, then a little more. "It's rising," I said, slowly, steadily, like something enormous was pushing upward through the water column. And our net was rising with it. The drum started turning on its own, no engine running. The cable began unspooling, feeding more line out toward whatever was coming up. "Cut it," Eldon shouted. Keen grabbed the shears, but before he reached the line, the drum stopped. The rising stopped. The cable went slack, and the mass on sonar vanished, just gone. One moment it was rising toward us. The next second the sonar screen looked clean and harmless, like nothing had ever been beneath us. We stood still. Nobody breathed. Then the net began to come up on its own, not fast at first, but then faster, faster, faster than we ever ran it. Line fed through so quickly smoke lifted off the drum. "Shut it off," Keen tried, but Eldon grabbed him. "Let it come." The net broke the surface, heavy, distorted, not round like a normal hull, stretched, warped, like something had pushed its way out. When it dumped itself onto the deck, a flood of fish poured out. Salmon, rockfish, and shapes I didn't recognize in the frantic tangle. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the fish. It was the hole, a perfect circle, 3 feet across. Edges burned smooth, no tearing, no frayed mesh, no struggle marks. It looked like something had cut its way out with a tool or heat or something else entirely. "What cuts net like that?" Keen asked softly. No one had an answer. We stared at the empty space where something should have been, where something had been. Something that didn't want to be caught. Eldon checked the sonar again. The mass was gone. The sea looked normal, bottom depth, nothing strange. "Pack up," he said. "We're done tonight." We worked in dead silence. My hands shook every time I coiled a line. The air felt heavy, thick, wrong. The ocean around us seemed bigger than usual, like it had stretched out, swallowing the world, leaving nothing but us on a tiny platform above an endless void. When we pulled in the last buoy, a deep vibration hit the hull. Low, slow, 5 seconds long, it crawled up my legs and into my ribs. "You hear that?" I whispered. Keen nodded, eyes wide. Eldon didn't say anything. He was already in the cabin, turning the boat toward home. We didn't talk, not for the entire 3-hour trip back. I didn't take my eyes off the water. Every ripple made my heart jump. Every dark patch made me think something might burst from below. But nothing did. The sun rose. The harbor grew clear. Other boats prepared to start their shift, cheerful voices drifting across the docks like we hadn't just witnessed something impossible. We told them the night had been slow. Equipment trouble. We didn't mention the hole. We didn't mention the sonar. We didn't mention the thing. And we never went back to those coordinates. Not on the surface. Up there, things looked normal enough. Bright sky, calm water, wind blowing steady from the west. But underneath, far below where light struggles just to survive, something was moving. You can feel it in the water when the deep shifts. It's subtle at first. A little extra weight in the swell. A strange temperature patch. A rhythm in the waves that doesn't match the weather. Most people don't notice it, but fishermen notice everything. And after what had happened with the net, I noticed too much. We weren't even planning to fish that area again. None of us wanted to. Eldon had marked those coordinates with a red cross on his map, something he almost never did. He was a practical man, didn't believe in ghosts or monsters or anything he couldn't explain, but he couldn't explain what happened that night, and he sure as hell wasn't going back to look for answers. "We'll head east this time," he said as we loaded gear onto the boat. "Better waters, shallower, normal." Normal sounded good. Normal was what I wanted. A boring shift with predictable nets and calm seas. But the ocean doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what it decides to give. And sometimes what it gives you isn't something you're ready for. The storm hit hard and fast. One moment the horizon was clear. The next, a wall of dark gray clouds shoved their way toward us like something enormous rising from the water itself. The wind turned sharp. The waves started climbing. The boat rolled hard enough to make my stomach twist. Within minutes, the rain started falling in sheets, and the sea around us turned into a chaos of white water and roaring wind. "Get below," Eldon shouted through the storm. "Tie everything down." Keen and I scrambled across the deck, gripping the rails as waves slammed into us. The sound of the storm swallowed everything. The wind, the rain, the groaning of the hull. It all blended into one monstrous voice howling across the Pacific. By the time we reached the sheltered cove we sometimes used during rough weather, the storm was at full strength. We dropped anchor, tied off the bow and stern, and huddled inside as the ocean tried to tear the world apart. For nearly 2 days, the storm raged. Lightning hit the water so close the cabin shook. The wind screamed like it was alive. The boat rocked and rolled until I thought it might break in half. Every few minutes, something slammed against the hull from outside, branches, debris, waves big enough to feel like impacts. But through all that noise, something else lingered under the storm's voice. Something too slow, too deep. Something I felt in my bones more than I heard. A low vibration. Just like the one from the night the net came up torn. I told myself it was the storm pushing water in strange patterns. I told myself it was the anchor chain straining. I told myself anything except the truth I didn't want to consider. That something was down there. Something moving under us. Something that didn't care about storms. When the weather finally broke on the morning of the 3rd day, the ocean was flat and glassy. Storms do that sometimes. They beat the sea into submission and then leave it dead calm behind them. The sky was clearing, streaked with pale blue behind the fading clouds. It felt almost peaceful, but peaceful doesn't mean safe. Eldon started the engine. "Let's check the lines," he said. "Storm probably ripped half of M to hell." We headed out slowly, the boat gliding through the strangely smooth water. Bits of debris floated everywhere, broken branches, pieces of kelp, even a shattered piece of some poor fisherman's lobster pot drifting alone on the surface. Keen leaned over the rail. "Storm stirred up everything," he said. "Whole ocean feels wrong." He was right. Something was off. Even the air felt heavier. When we reached our first line, I saw immediately that the floats were pulled low in the water, too low, meaning the catch was heavier than it should have been, but that didn't make sense. Fish don't usually feed in storms. They scatter, they dive deep. The ocean becomes too chaotic for steady schools. So why were the nets heavy? Eldon hit the winch. The cable rattled as it came up, dripping seaweed and broken debris. The drum pulled slow at first, like something resisted it from below. My stomach tightened. Memories of the last time something resisted came rushing back. But this time the line gave. Whatever weight it held wasn't dragging us sideways or downward. It was just heavy. The net broke the surface, and I understood why. Dozens of deep-water fish spilled onto the deck, grenadiers with their long tails, slick ratfish with venomous spines, and hagfish coiling like pale worms in the tangled pile. These species never rise to the surface on their own, not unless something forces them up from the depths. And storms could do that, yes, but not storms like this. This was something else. "This isn't right," Keen muttered. We're not even near the deep trenches. I bent down and moved fish aside, sorting the ones we couldn't sell. The ratfish went back overboard, the hagfish too. But as I reached for a large rockfish, I felt something odd lodged in its gills. It was long, solid, cold. At first I thought it was a stick, or some kind of strange debris the storm had dragged up. But when I pulled it free, the world seemed to slow. It was a finger, not exactly human, but not exactly anything else I had seen. 4 inches long, smooth, gray, with 3 joints like a finger should have, a pointed nail or maybe a claw at the tip. The texture was wrong, too smooth, too cold, and too perfectly shaped. Keen stepped back. "What the hell is that? Roar, what is that?" I don't know," I said, turning it over in my hand. My fingers trembled. It didn't feel like it belonged in my world, didn't feel like something that should exist. "It's not fish," I said, "not anything I've ever seen." Eldon climbed down from the cabin and stared at it with a hard, unreadable expression. "Storm brought up more than debris," he said. His voice was quiet, too quiet. "Put it in the wheelhouse," he added. "Wrap it up, we're not just throwing that thing back." We checked the rest of the lines. The catch was good, too good. Every net was heavy with deep water species that shouldn't be anywhere near the surface. By twilight, the hold was half full. Eldon decided to make one more run before heading back to port at sunrise. As night deepened, the air grew unnaturally still again. Something about the ocean after the storm felt worse than before, as if the storm hadn't passed through the water, but had been pushed out by something underneath it. Keen cooked dinner in silence. Even the clinking of metal utensils sounded wrong. Too loud. Too sharp. By midnight, he went to bed. Eldon checked the engine one last time and followed. That left me alone in the cabin with the instruments. The hum of the motor filled the space like an uneasy heartbeat. Then, at just after 3 a.m., something moved below. It started with a thud, muffled but heavy enough to shake dust from the overhead lamps. I stood up fast. Another thud. Harder. Directly below the cabin floor. My heart hammered in my chest. The sound was coming from the hold. From the ice tank, the place where we had stored the deep water catch, where we had buried everything under layers of ice, where the finger had come from. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the hatch. Cold air rushed up into my face. The smell of fish, salt, and melting ice drifted around me. The metal door of the ice tank vibrated softly. Then something hit it again. Hard. The door jumped. Something inside the tank was alive, something strong enough to bend the door inward. My skin crawled. I took a step down the ladder, slowly, quietly. My light beam drifted across the walls, equipment, and coils of rope. Another impact hit the tank door, hard enough to make the hinges creak. My legs felt weak. Something in that tank wanted out, something the storm had dragged up, something that didn't die in the cold. I backed up the ladder and slammed the hatch shut. For a long moment, I stood there with my hand on the latch, shaking. Then I whispered, "Eldon," but I didn't need to finish. He was already in the doorway, eyes wide and face pale. He had heard it too. That was how the night truly began, how the deep reminded us that storms weren't the only things rising, and how the ocean decided that the surface wasn't ours, not anymore. When Eldon appeared in the cabin doorway, I knew he had heard the sound before I even spoke. His face was pale, eyes darting toward the floor as another dull thud echoed beneath our boots. The metal hatch rattled. The air itself felt tight, like the boat was holding its breath along with us. Keen stumbled out of his bunk behind Eldon, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's happening?" he mumbled. Then the noise came again. A heavy, wet impact, not like a fish flopping, not like ice shifting. Something living was down there, something strong enough to shake the holds. Keen froze, eyes going wide. "That's coming from the tank," he whispered. I nodded. Eldon swallowed hard and grabbed a flashlight. "All right. Let's see what we're dealing with." His voice sounded brave, but I could hear the tightness in it. He didn't want to go down there any more than I did. But we were fishermen. We dealt with problems as they came. We didn't run unless we had no choice. He opened the hatch. A breath of cold air drifted up, thick with the smell of ice and fish. The ladder descended into darkness, the beam of Eldon's light barely cutting through it. For a moment, none of us moved. Then the door of the ice tank shuddered so violently I thought it might burst open right then. Eldon gritted his teeth. "Let's go." He descended first. Keen and I followed. The hold was colder than usual, much colder. My breath came out in white clouds and a thin layer of frost clung to some of the equipment. The storm had cooled the water, yes, but not enough to make the air feel like the inside of a freezer. Something else had lowered the temperature, something in that tank. The metal door trembled with each impact. Eldon raised a hand, signaling us to stop. We stood about 20 feet from the tank, listening. Something scraped on the inside, a dragging sound, a heavy weight shifting, slow, deliberate movement. Keen whispered, "It's alive." Eldon shot him a look that screamed, "Don't say it out loud," but it was too late. The truth was already in our heads. Everything in that tank had been dead, frozen under layers of ice, except one thing. The thing attached to that finger I had found. I felt panic rise in my throat and I forced myself to swallow it. Panicking wouldn't help, thinking might. "Whatever it is," I said quietly, "it shouldn't be alive in there." "It shouldn't exist at all," Keen muttered. Eldon approached the tank door cautiously, the beam of his flashlight trembling just slightly. He placed a hand on the metal. The thing hit the door again so hard Eldon jumped back. The door bent inward. A long dent appeared across the center, ridges forming where something had slammed from the other side. The steel was thick, strong, reinforced for accidental pressure changes, and something inside had just warped it like it was tin foil. "We need to get rid of it," Keen said. "Open the deck hatch, let it out, push it back into the ocean." "And if it doesn't want to go," Eldon replied, "if it comes up instead of out." No one answered. The tank door shook again. A low, rhythmic sound vibrated through the air, almost like breathing, slow, heavy breathing. The three of us stared at the door, fear creeping like cold water up our legs. Eldon finally spoke. "Get back, both of you." He reached toward the emergency latch. "Wait," I hissed. "You're not opening it." "Not fully," he said. "But something in there is going to break through eventually. I'd rather control when it happens." Keen shook his head violently. "No, no way. We don't know what that thing is." "We know it's strong enough to break the door," Eldon said calmly. "If it gets out on its own, we're dead. If we open it a crack and force it toward the deck hatch, we might have a chance. Or we might let a monster loose on the boat," I whispered. Eldon gave a tight smile. "It's already loose. It's just trapped for now." He wasn't wrong, but the idea of letting that thing out, whatever it was, filled me with a fear I hadn't felt since I was a kid. The kind of fear that sticks deep in your gut and tells you something is very, very wrong. Still, we had no time to argue. Another impact shook the tank. The door bent a little more. We had minutes, maybe seconds. "Okay," I said, forcing air into my lungs. "What's the plan?" Eldon pointed at the deck hatch, a large opening above the hold normally used for loading big equipment or offloading catch. "We open the deck hatch, get the floodlights ready, make noise, lights, motion. We try to drive it up and out, like herding." "Herding," Keen repeated as if the word tasted sour. "We're herding something that can bend metal." Eldon didn't respond. He was already climbing the ladder. We emerged onto the deck. The night air felt strange, calm after the storm, but too still. The ocean was dark and glossy, reflecting only the faint glow from our deck lamps. There wasn't a ripple in sight. Keen muttered, "I hate nights like this." "Focus," Eldon said. "Open the hatch." I reached for the lever and we unlocked the heavy steel cover. Together we slid it aside. The gaping black square yawned open above the hold, letting cold air spill out from below. Eldon fixed the floodlights around the opening, angling them downward. The beams created sharp, bright columns stabbing into the darkness of the hold. Keen stood ready with the longest deck hook we had, gripping it tightly as if the wooden pole would somehow protect him. "All right," Eldon said. "Roar, climb halfway down and unlatch the tank door. Not fully, just enough for pressure to release. Then get back up here fast." I hesitated. If anything went wrong, I would be closest, but I nodded. "Okay." I took the ladder slowly, one foot after another, trying to quiet the shaking in my hands. The lights above cast harsh white beams over the hold. Shadows stretched long along the wall. When I reached the floor, the cold air bit into my skin. My breath fogged instantly. The tank door swelled outward with another heavy thud. I felt the vibration in my chest. My heartbeat hammered. "All right," Eldon whispered from above. "Just the latch, then get back." I lifted the latch bar. The moment the metal clicked, the entire door exploded outward. Not opened, exploded. It flew off its hinges like a gigantic fist had punched it from inside. The panel, thick and reinforced, shot across the hold and crashed into the opposite wall with a deafening clang. Ice spilled out in a white rush. Fish tumbled across the floor, sliding on melting frost. And something else moved in the cloud of cold air pouring from the tank. I froze. The shape was pale, almost white against the darkness. The size of a person, but wrong, too long in some places, too narrow in others. Its limbs bent in ways that didn't match human joints. Slick skin that reflected the floodlight like wet stone. It crouched for a moment behind a pile of nets. Then it moved. So fast my eyes barely tracked it. It darted across the hold, a blur of pale motion. It didn't go for me. It went for the ladder, for the opening, for the deck. "Keen," I shouted, "it's heading up." Keen swung the deck hook down just as the pale thing reached the top of the ladder. It screeched, a sound I can only describe as metal scraping against something soft, and recoiled. But only for a second. Then, instead of climbing up, it ran, toward the corner straight at the open deck hatch. And it leaped. Its body flew upward with impossible speed, twisting midair like a fish breaching the surface. It burst from the hold and landed on the deck with a sound like wet fabric slapping wood. Keen stumbled back, terror in his eyes. The thing did not attack. Instead, it scrambled across the deck, long arms pulling it forward with sickening grace, and launched itself straight over the side of the boat. The splash was small, too small for something that size. And then the ocean swallowed it. Gone. Just gone. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. No one breathed. Then Eldon whispered, "What did we just let go?" Keen dropped the hook. It clattered onto the deck, too loud in the silent night. "It wasn't attacking," he said quietly. "It was escaping." I climbed the rest of the ladder, legs shaking. The cold air still drifted up from the hold. "What the hell was it running from?" I asked. None of us answered, because none of us wanted to think about the truth, whatever it was. Something else might have brought it up from the deep, and that something might still be down there. We cleaned the hold as the sky began to light, torn fish, melted ice, a ruined door that looked like it had been punched by a machine. When we finally pulled into port at sunrise, the world looked normal again. Fishermen joked on the docks. Gulls screamed overhead. Sunlight glittered on calm water. But underneath, somewhere down in the dark, something was waiting. Something that had chased that pale creature upward. Something that had lost its prey. Something big enough to cut perfect circles, bend steel, and rise through water like gravity meant nothing. And I had the sinking feeling it wasn't done with us yet. After what happened with the ice tank, we all agreed on one thing. We were done with the deep. Done with storms. Done with strange lights. Done with nets coming up warped. Done with cold things crawling out of the hold in the middle of the night. But the ocean doesn't care what you're done with. It gives you what it gives, and you either take it or you leave forever. Eldon wasn't the kind of man who left. Neither was Keen. And I told myself I wasn't either, right up until the moment I realized that sometimes the ocean forces you into choices you don't want to make. 3 days passed after the pale creature slid back into the water. 3 days of restless sleep, flashes of white skin in my dreams, and the memory of that perfect circular hole burned into my mind like a warning. We tried to go back to normal fishing grounds. Shallower waters, more boats around us, warm currents. But normal didn't feel normal anymore. Every sonar ping made me flinch. Every wave shift felt like something brushing the hull. Every shadow under the water made my throat tight. Eldon tried to pretend nothing had happened. He focused on fuel logs, ice packs, and catch quotas as if the only thing we had seen was a broken tank door. But his eyes darted toward the water every few minutes. Keen kept cleaning the deck even when it was already clean. scrubbed the same spots, wiped the same rails. Something about the repetition soothed him, but the way his hands shook said the calm was only on the outside. As for me, I kept replaying the moment the tank door exploded, the shape crawling over the deck. The way it moved, too fast, too smooth. Something had been chasing it, something we never saw, something still out there. We were heading east on the third day after the incident when the ocean went wrong again. Not loud wrong, not storm wrong, silent wrong. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you've stepped into the center of a vast empty room where something is holding its breath, waiting for you to notice it. I was in the cabin at the time, watching the horizon. The sky was a soft gray, the sun hidden behind clouds that looked like worn cotton. A light breeze rippled across the surface of the water. Then suddenly the breeze died. The waves flattened, the air stilled. The sounds around the boat, water slapping hull, rope creaking, engine hum, faded into a soft nothing. Not completely silent, but muted, as if something was covering the world with a thick blanket of soundless pressure. I straightened slowly. "Eldon," I called. "Something feels off." He joined me in the cabin, frowning. "What's wrong?" "Listen." He did, long enough for concern to crease his forehead, then he nodded. "It's too quiet." Keen came up from the deck. "Either the world just died," he said, "or something else about to happen." The three of us stood there in that unnatural stillness. I think all of us were waiting for the same thing, the deep vibration. The one we'd felt in the hull. The one that wasn't mechanical or oceanic or natural. It didn't come. But something else did. The sonar beeped, soft at first, a normal ping, then again, then again. The screen lit up with a cluster of bright dots, a school of fish, but not just any school, one so dense it almost filled the sonar display. A cloud of returns, tightly packed, moving fast. Keen leaned over the screen. "They're running," he said. "What from?" I asked. He didn't answer. Eldon scanned the readouts. "They're rising. Fish don't rise that fast unless predators are chasing them. Big predators." But nothing on the sonar showed anything behind them. Just the school moving upward like something was pushing them toward the surface. "Get ready to drop nets," Eldon said. I stared at him, stunned. "We're fishing here. We need the catch," he replied. "This is good. Storm brought fish up. We shouldn't waste it." Keen and I exchanged a look. Not fear, not exactly, more like disbelief. But we did our job. We moved to the deck. We dropped the first net. The water swallowed the lines with a soft hiss. Even then, the ocean remained perfectly still. Too still. Keen whispered, "Feels like the whole sea is holding its breath." I didn't respond because I felt it too. When the winch motor started pulling the net back up, everything seemed normal at first. The drum hummed, the cable tightened. The boat leaned a little to compensate for the weight. Then the net broke the surface, and hundreds of fish spilled onto the deck, more than we'd caught in a month combined. Rockfish, lingcod, grenadiers, ratfish, deep water species that shouldn't have been anywhere near the surface unless something had driven them up. "We're rich," Keen whispered. His voice didn't sound happy, more confused, because mixed in with the fish were strange scraps of something else. Shredded pieces of soft, pale tissue, not human, not fully animal, not bone, not muscle, something in between. Eldon poked a piece with a stick. "What the hell is this?" I crouched beside him. The chunk was white and smooth with a faint bluish tint. It didn't look like flesh, but didn't look like anything mechanical either. It bent slightly when Eldon pressed it, but didn't tear. "Feels like rubber," Keen said. "Feels like skin," I said softly. We didn't have time to think about it. The sonar beeped again. Harder, faster, urgent. Eldon ran into the cabin. "Roar, Keen, you need to see this." We sprinted after him. The sonar screen flickered. Bright shapes. Too many to count. The fish cluster we saw before was gone, scattered, fractured, but something else showed up on the screen. A shape, deep, large, unmoving, a mass, dense, dark. "Wrong." Keen swallowed hard. "Not again." "It's the same shape," I whispered. "Same size, same density." Eldon stared at the screen, eyes locked. "It's below us, about 300 meters. And it's not moving," I said. "Not yet," Keen corrected. The silence pressed tighter around us. The air felt too thin, like breathing was harder. The ocean was flat as glass, and the shape on the sonar stayed perfectly still. "Should we leave?" Keen asked. "Yes," I said immediately. "No," Eldon said at the exact same time. He stepped back from the console and grabbed the throttle. "We're not running, not until I know what that thing is." "You want to find out?" I shouted. After everything we saw, Eldon didn't look at me. "This is my boat. I'm not letting something chase us away from our livelihood." Keen's voice cracked. "Eldon, that thing chased something out of our hold. It bent steel like nothing. It made vibrations in the hull. It cut our net like a perfect circle." Eldon turned. His face was tight with stubborn fear. "We don't know what it is, and I won't be scared off by shadows on a screen." As if responding to his words, the shape moved, just a little, barely enough to notice, but it moved. Eldon froze, the sonar beeped. The shape rose a meter, then another, slow, steady, inevitable. "Oh God," Keen whispered. "Eldon," I said quietly, "it's coming up." Eldon didn't touch the controls. His hands hovered above them, shaking. The sonar beeped faster, the shape rose faster. 80 meters, 70, 60. Keen grabbed my arm. "We need to go," but Eldon didn't move. His voice was barely a whisper. Why is it coming up?" "Because something took its prey," I whispered. He turned toward me slowly, eyes widening. "You think it's hunting?" "I think we caught something that belonged to it," I replied. "And now it wants it back." 40 meters, 38, 36. "Eldon," I shouted, "move the boat." He snapped out of whatever trance held him and slammed the throttle forward. The engine roared, the boat lurched, but the sonar still showed the shape rising, and rising, matching our speed, following us, as if it knew exactly where we were, as if it could see through the hull. 20 meters. "Faster," Keen screamed. "Faster." Eldon pushed the engine to its limit. The hull shook with strain. 15 meters, 10. The shape slowed, then stopped. 8 meters beneath us, just sitting there, waiting, watching. We kept moving fast, desperate, terrified. But when I looked back at the sonar screen, the shape stayed there, hovering, holding its depth, as if marking a boundary, as if warning us. "You came too close, go no farther." I didn't say the words out loud. The message was loud enough. We didn't speak for the rest of the trip back to harbor. Not until the docks were in sight. Not until other boats, other voices, other lights made the world feel real again. Only then did Eldon speak. "We're not talking about this," he said. His voice was flat. Keen didn't argue. I didn't either. Some things you don't talk about because speaking them makes them real. And what was beneath our boat was far too real already. But that night, lying in my bunk, unable to sleep, I kept thinking about one thing, the pale creature that escaped into the ocean. The thing that had been afraid, the thing that fled. What could make something like that run? And worse, what if it wanted it back? What if it wanted more? What if we weren't done with the deep, not even close? I didn't sleep the night we returned to harbor. I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the gentle rocking of the boat against the dock. Normally, that motion soothed me. It had put me to sleep for more nights than I could count. But now, each soft sway made me think of sonar blips, rising shapes, and pale limbs scraping across the hold floor. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's impossible movement, how it twisted, how it fled, how it leaped into the water like the ocean was the only place where its body made sense. What hunted something like that? And what if it hadn't given up? By dawn, I gave up on sleep and headed out onto the deck. The harbor was waking up slowly. Lights flickered on in nearby boats. The smell of diesel and fish drifted across the docks. A few gulls circled overhead, screaming their usual complaints. Normal things, comforting things. But beneath all that normalcy, something felt wrong. Not just nerves or stress or fear. Something deeper. Like the ocean itself had shifted in the last 3 days and no one had told the surface. Keen joined me a few minutes later, bleary-eyed but alert. His face looked older than it had a week ago, like the deep water had carved lines into him. "You didn't sleep either," I said. He shook his head. "No, every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing crawling up the hold wall." He rubbed his temples. "I keep thinking, what if it wasn't running from something that chased it? What if it was running from something inside the tank, something we didn't see?" I stared at him, my stomach tightening. "Like what?" "I don't know," he admitted. But that finger we found, that wasn't just a piece of something. It was from a body, something alive, something torn apart. He turned to the water and stared at the gentle ripples near the dock. What if we pulled up more than one thing from the deep? What if there were pieces of something bigger? What if the pale creature wasn't the only survivor? I hated that idea, hated that it made sense. Before I could respond, Eldon appeared from the cabin, a cup of coffee in hand. Looked as exhausted as we felt, but his expression was iron hard. "We're heading back out tonight," he said. Keen nearly dropped the coil of rope he was holding. "What? Are you insane? After everything, we need to fish," Eldon cut in. "Storm damaged half the fleet, supplies low, prices are going up. If we get a good haul, we'll get good money." "And what if the deep comes back for us?" Keen snapped. Eldon didn't flinch. "It won't." "How do you know?" "Because whatever we saw is gone," he said. "It followed us, it hovered under us, and when we turned away, it stayed behind. It didn't chase us back to port. It didn't drag us down. It didn't attack." Keen's voice shook, "because it was waiting." Eldon turned toward him sharply. "Waiting for what?" Keen swallowed. "For us to come back." Silence stretched across the deck. I didn't want to agree with Keen, but I didn't want to agree with Eldon either. My mind felt split in two, half wanting to believe the deep creature had let us go, half convinced we had stepped across some invisible boundary we were never supposed to cross. "We'll stay far east this time," Eldon said. "Shallow water, no deep trenches, nothing weird, just fish." Keen didn't respond. Neither did I, because deep down, all of us knew something the others weren't saying. The deep doesn't need trenches. It doesn't need storms. It doesn't need darkness. It comes when it wants to. It follows what it wants, and sometimes it remembers. We left the harbor just after sunset. The sky glowed orange along the horizon as night crept over the water. The ocean was calm, a gentle swell that made the boat rise and fall like it was breathing. Eldon kept the engine low, letting us glide across the darkening surface. I watched the water as we moved, searching for anything, ripples, shadows, reflections, that didn't look right. But everything seemed ordinary, too ordinary. That was worse. Normal sea means normal trouble. Silent sea means something is watching. Keen stayed near the stern, arms crossed tightly, eyes locked on the wake. He didn't speak, didn't move much. Just watched the water trail behind us as though he expected something to rise out of it. I couldn't blame him. The pale creature had climbed its way out of our hold, and whatever was chasing it had known exactly where we were, tracking us with impossible precision. It could be anywhere, under the hull, behind the engine, waiting below in the dark. We didn't talk much as we moved farther from the harbor lights. The ocean stretched out black and endless. Stars appeared overhead like pale pinpricks in a vast void. Around midnight, Eldon slowed the engine. "We're here," he said. The GPS showed a set of coordinates far from where anything strange had happened. Safe waters, east waters, places fishermen had worked for decades without incident. Nothing deep here, nothing weird. At least that's what the charts said. But the ocean doesn't update its own maps. We dropped our first line. The floats bobbed gently. The winch hummed with that familiar mechanical rhythm. For a while, things felt steady, almost normal. Then the radar beeped just once. A single soft ping, not an alarm, not an alert, just a contact appearing on the edge of the screen. Eldon leaned in, frowning. Probably just another boat. "Where?" I asked, scanning the horizon. He pointed at the radar display. "Bearing 240, moving slow." "Lights?" Keen asked. "No," Eldon admitted. "But maybe they're off. Some people don't follow regulations." Normally, I would have agreed easily, but after everything, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed the binoculars and scanned the direction the radar indicated. Nothing, just dark ocean. No boat, no lights, no shape. "Maybe I missed it," I said quietly, lowering the binoculars. The radar pinged again. The contact moved closer. "That boat's got no lights on," Keen said nervously. "Could be trouble." Eldon's voice stayed even. "Could be a disabled vessel or someone drifting after engine failure. We'll check it. That's what we're supposed to do." I took a deep breath. Every part of me wanted to tell him no. Wanted to steer the boat in the opposite direction. Wanted to leave the ocean behind forever. But fishermen help each other. That's the rule. That's the law. That's the way things have always been. Eldon adjusted our course slightly. The radar contact drifted closer. Faster now, too fast for a drifting vessel. Still no visual, I said, scanning the darkness again. That's impossible, Eldon muttered. At this distance we should see something. Keen's voice cracked. Unless there's nothing to see. The radar pinged once more. The contact jumped closer on the screen, then it vanished, just disappeared. The screen went blank except for our own signal. Equipment glitch, Eldon muttered. He tapped the console lightly. The radar screen flickered. Then another contact appeared, directly behind us. Keen sucked in a sharp breath. Eldon, what is that? Eldon didn't answer. The radar contact moved, not drifting, moving fast, straight toward us. I grabbed the throttle. We need to go. Before I could push the lever forward, the sonar beeped. A low, soft pulse. The kind you hear when something large enters the sonar field quietly. I looked down at the sonar display. A shape appeared, massive, dense, close, too close. It wasn't under us. Not this time. It was rising behind us at an angle, like it was ascending along our wake. Following, Keen whispered, "It's the same thing." "No," I said automatically. "It can't be." But it was. It had followed us from the deep, through the storm, across the surface. It had not forgotten. The mass rose slowly, deliberately, as if it wanted us to see it. "Turn the boat," Eldon said quietly. "Which way?" I whispered. "Any way." I grabbed the wheel and swung it hard to starboard. The boat leaned sharply, water splashing up the side. The sonar mast didn't follow our turn. It adjusted its path, smoothly, perfectly, as if it could predict where we were going, as if it was watching us not through screens but through the water itself. "Eldon," Keen said, "what does it want?" Eldon swallowed. "I think," he said softly, "it thinks we still have its prey." "That pale thing?" I asked. "The one that escaped, it's long gone, it swam away." "I know," Eldon said. "But maybe the deep doesn't know that." The sonar pinged again. The shape rose another 10 meters, then another, then stopped, hovering 20 meters below the surface, directly behind us, just waiting. Keen clutched the railing. "It's not trying to attack, it's signaling." The radar beeped. One pulse, then another, slow, even, measured, like a pattern, like a message. "What does that mean?" I whispered. No one answered because none of us knew. But I think all of us felt the same thing. The ocean was telling us something, warning us, calling us, reminding us that the deep remembers its own, and that we had become part of something, some pattern, some cycle, some ancient rhythm of hunter and hunted that we barely understood. When the sonar shape finally sank back into the deep, slowly, purposefully, like a giant creature drifting down into darkness, we didn't speak. We just watched the screen until the last faint echo faded. Then Eldon whispered the first words any of us said for nearly 10 minutes. "We're going home." No one argued, no one looked back, and no one breathed easily until the harbor lights appeared in the distance. But that night, lying awake again, unable to sleep, hearing the water lap gently against the hull, I realized something. The thing in the deep hadn't chased us. It had tracked us. It had found us. It had followed us. Not because it wanted to kill us. Not because it wanted to reclaim its prey, but because it wanted to make sure we knew it was still there, and that it wasn't finished. Not yet. Not even close. The morning after the deep creature tracked us across the open water, the harbor felt different. Not visibly. Not in any way a normal person would notice. But fishermen sense changes in the air the same way birds sense storms. The mood was wrong. The rhythm of the place, the sounds, the smells, the small routines felt off-balanced, like the docks were breathing too slow. Keen and I stood on the deck sipping stale coffee while Eldon filed our logs. Around us, the harbor slowly came to life. Boats creaked against moorings. Gulls circled overhead. Engines sputtered to life in short bursts as fishermen prepared for their shifts. Yet something was missing. Noise, laughter, conversation. The normal chatter that fills the docks every morning. There were fewer men on the walkways, fewer boats prepping nets, fewer lights on in the cabins, and the people who were there all shared the same look, wide eyes, tight brows, and lips pressed shut. Something had happened, something no one wanted to say. Keen, I muttered, does the harbor feel light to you? He frowned. Light how? Like there's less of it, like a piece is missing. Keen turned slow, scanning the rows of tied-up boats. Then he stiffened. Where's the Pacific Tauren? My stomach dropped. He was right. The Pacific Tauren was always docked 3 slips down from us. A squat blue trawler with a dented starboard rail and a loud engine you could hear halfway across the harbor. The captain, Ren Ford, was one of the most reliable fishermen out here. Rain or shine, storm or calm. He was always the first to leave the harbor and the last to return. But today nothing. No boat, no sounds, no Ren. Maybe he went out early, I said, though I didn't believe it. Not without his deck lights, Keen replied, and not with the weather looking like this. He gestured toward the horizon. Thick clouds hung low, heavy and layered like bruises spreading across the sky. Storms weren't expected, but the ocean didn't always follow schedules. Before we could speculate more, Eldon stepped out of the cabin. He was pale, holding a piece of paper. "You see this?" he asked. We walked over. On the paper was a printed message from the harbor office. Vessel, Pacific Tauren, overdue last contact, 23:47 previous night status, unknown coordinates last recorded. The coordinates followed. I felt my breath catch. Keen's eyes widened. No, that can't be right, but it was. The coordinates were only a few miles from where the deep creature had hovered 20 meters beneath us. Did Ren see it? Keen whispered. Did he cross its path? My stomach tightened. We don't know that. We do, Keen said quietly. We just don't want to admit it. Eldon folded the paper and shoved it into his pocket. We're not jumping to conclusions. Boats go overdue sometimes. Radios fail, engines die. Not Ren's, Keen said. He keeps that ship tight. He could be drifting, Eldon insisted. We'll find him. His confidence didn't convince me. Not this time. Not after what we'd seen. Not after the deep shape followed us with unnatural precision. Eldon turned to both of us. Gear up, we're heading out. I stared at him. We're searching for the Tauren. No, Eldon said firmly. We're checking our lines. We stick to shallows. If we see Ren, we help him. If not, we stay out of the deep. Keen shook his head slowly. You don't believe that. Eldon hesitated, only for a moment. But that was enough to show the truth. He was scared too. He just didn't want to be. We left the harbor under gray skies. The ocean was calmer than usual, too calm. The water had a strange, metallic sheen to it, reflecting the thick clouds above like a sheet of oil. The air felt heavy, damp, and oddly warm. Keen stood near the bow, looking out over the endless gray. I don't like this, he muttered. Feels like the ocean knows something we don't. He wasn't wrong. Half an hour into our trip, Eldon called from the cabin. Roar, Keen, look at this. We hurried inside. Eldon pointed at the radar screen. A faint signal blinked on the edge of the display. A drifting vessel, moving slow. No radio signature. I felt my chest tight. Is that? Could be Ren, Eldon said. He adjusted our heading. The signal drifted closer. Keen whispered under his breath. Please just be a broken engine. Please just be a normal problem. But as we closed the distance, the knot in my stomach grew. The ocean around the drifting vessel felt different. The water grew darker, almost navy black. Waves moved oddly, as if passing over an unseen shape beneath. Then we saw it, the Pacific Tauren, only the bow, just the front third of the vessel floated on the surface. The rest was gone, torn away, ripped clean off. I stopped breathing. Keen made a small choking noise. Eldon gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. The bow bobbed gently, the edges torn apart in a circular shape, too perfect, too clean, too smooth. My blood ran cold. The same, Keen whispered. The same pattern as the net. Perfect circle, like something cut it. Eldon said nothing. We drifted closer. As we neared the wreckage, a strange silence filled the air. Not the deep silence, not the dangerous stillness we'd felt before. This was a heavy, sorrowful quiet, like the ocean itself was mourning something. The deck of the Pacific Tauren's bow was covered in deep scratches, long lines, some straight, some curved, all gouged into the wood like claw marks or something stronger. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. Nothing but the torn front of a boat that had been whole just 12 hours earlier. Something pulled it apart, Keen whispered. Something big, something smart, something that cuts in circles. Eldon stared at the wreckage, jaw clenched. We're towing it back. What if the rest of it is below us? I asked. Silence. We all knew the answer. There's no way, Eldon said finally. It wouldn't attack this close to shore. But his voice cracked at the end. For the first time since I'd known him, Eldon Marita, the unshakable captain, sounded scared. Keen backed away from the edge. We need to leave, now. We can't. Eldon turned sharply. We're the only ones out here if Wren and his crew are alive. They're not, Keen snapped. Look at that boat, look at that circle. That thing we saw, it found them. It followed them. Or maybe they crossed too close to its territory. And this is what happens when you do. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the ropes on our deck. I hated what Keen said, but part of me agreed. What do we do? I asked quietly. Eldon closed his eyes for a moment, taking a slow breath. Then he spoke. We search. Keen gasped. Are you kidding? Search for what? Bodies or whatever ripped this boat in half. Wren's a friend, Eldon said. He'd search for us. Keen's voice dropped low. Not if the ocean told him to stay away. Something about the phrase chilled me. Because the ocean did tell us, with sonar, with circles cut into steel, with rising shapes, with messages in the deep, and we ignored it. Now we were here, floating above something the ocean didn't want surface people to see. Eldon stepped out onto the deck and tossed a grappling line to hook the Pacific Taurin's bow. The rope tightened. The shattered vessel bobbed. Then the sonar beeped. One soft ping. Keen and I ran back into the cabin. The screen lit up. A mass. Large, dense, motionless. Directly below us, not rising, not moving, just sitting there, watching, waiting. My mouth ran dry. Eldon, he didn't step inside, he was still on deck. The mass pulsed on the sonar like a heartbeat. Keen whispered shakily, it's the same thing, it followed Wren and now it followed us. No, I said quietly, it didn't follow us. Keen stared at me. It stayed here, I continued. It stayed with the wreck, with what's left, guarding it or waiting for something. Eldon finally stepped into the cabin. His face was pale. He saw the sonar. He didn't speak. He didn't need to because the mass shifted slightly, just a little. Then a tiny movement reached the hull, a faint vibration, like fingertips brushing metal or something enormous breathing against us. Cut the line, Eldon said. Keen sprinted to the deck with a knife. The moment the rope snapped, the sonar mass sank. Slowly, gracefully, down, down, down into the dark. Then it disappeared, gone. As if it had never been there. Only the bow of the Pacific Taurin remained, drifting quietly. Alone, Eldon exhaled shakily. We're done. We're not fishing here again. We're not fishing anywhere near here. Keen nodded slowly, still staring at the water. I couldn't take my eyes off the sonar display. The blank screen, the empty surface, the motionless calm. The calm that meant danger wasn't gone, only patient, waiting, watching, depths that remember. As we turned back toward land, I had a thought I didn't want to say out loud. What if the deep creature wasn't the only thing down there? What if the pale thing wasn't prey but bait? And what if whatever tore Wren's boat apart was still hunting? We didn't talk on the way back to harbor. Not a word, not a whisper, not even a breath louder than necessary. It felt like any noise, any vibration, might wake something in the water beneath us. Something that had followed Wren and torn the Pacific Taurin apart. Something that had risen beneath us days earlier. Something that understood our presence in the deep. The ocean was quiet around us, but it wasn't the natural quiet of early morning. It was the heavy, waiting kind of quiet, the kind you hear in a forest just before an avalanche breaks loose. A silence that warns instead of soothes. Keen stood with both hands gripping the bow rail, knuckles white. He didn't look at the water. Didn't look at the sky. He stared forward, locked on the distant shape of the harbor, as if looking anywhere else would invite something into his mind he wasn't ready to handle. Eldon kept the engine running low. Not to conserve fuel, not because the water was rough, but because he was afraid to make the boat too loud. Afraid to stir the surface more than necessary, afraid that something might hear us, or recognize us, or remember. As we neared the harbor entrance, I finally saw Eldon's hands tremble on the wheel. Eldon Marita, toughest captain I'd ever known, looked like a man realizing he didn't command much after all. Not the ocean, not the fish, not the world beneath the surface, and not his own fear. We passed the breakwater. The water changed. The swell softened. The harbor waters always felt sheltered, but this time they felt like the only safe place left on Earth. We docked in silence. None of us reached for ropes immediately. None of us moved with the usual routine. We only stood there, stunned, staring at nothing. Finally, Eldon whispered, "We can't tell anyone." Keen spun on him, eyes wide. "We have to." "No," Eldon snapped. "And who do we tell, Keen?" "The harbor office, the Coast Guard. That something in the ocean tore a boat in half and followed us like a dog on a lead." Keen opened his mouth, but nothing came out, because Eldon was right. No one would believe us. No one would even take a report like that seriously. They'd assume we'd been drinking, or hallucinating, or that a rogue wave had broken the Pacific torrent, or that a whale had struck it, or that Wren hit submerged debris. But none of those explanations matched what we saw, and the deep didn't care about human logic. I spoke quietly. "We need to talk to Wren's brother." Eldon's jaw tightened. "No, absolutely not. He deserves to know something happened." "What are we supposed to tell him?" Eldon shot back. "That the ocean came alive and swallowed his brother." "We don't know that he's dead," I said. Eldon's expression softened. "Roar, you saw that bow. You saw the shape beneath the wreck. Whatever tore the torrent apart wasn't something anyone survives." Keen bowed his head, but I wasn't convinced. A small part of me, the stubborn, desperate part, still hoped, still imagined Wren clinging to debris, floating somewhere, waiting to be found. But another part of me knew better, a darker part. The part that had heard the sonar pings in the night and seen shapes rise from black water. Eldon looked at both of us. "We're going home, get some rest. We'll decide our next move tomorrow." But none of us slept much that day. I tried lying in my bunk, but sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the Pacific torrent's torn bow drifting alone on the waves, saw the perfect circular tier along its edges, saw the sonar mass pulsing beneath us like a heartbeat. By noon, I'd abandoned the idea of rest and walked along the docks. The sky was a solid layer of gray, thick and flat. People moved quietly, too quietly. Rumors were spreading, the kind that move fast through fishing towns where danger feels closer than on land. I passed a group of men huddled near a pile of crates. "Heard the Torrens missing. Storm might have taken it. No storm last night. Engine failure maybe." One man lowered his voice. "You didn't hear this from me." But something Espen spotted off the east ridge. Something big, something with a strange sonar return. My stomach tightened. "Like a whale?" another asked. The man shook his head. "Whales don't ping like that. This was deeper, more solid. They're asking people to stay clear of the area." My blood felt like ice. They knew, not exactly, not the truth, not the way we did, but enough that fear had started leaking into the harbor like oil. I walked away before they saw me listening. At sunset, Eldon called both of us back to the boat. His face was drawn like he hadn't slept either. Keen looked worse, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking slightly. I probably looked the same. "We're not going out tonight," Eldon said. Keen exhaled like he'd been holding his breath all day. "But," Eldon continued, "we need to check our equipment, patch the hull, make sure everything is secure." Keen frowned. "Why?" "Because," Eldon said, "something tells me the ocean isn't done with us." He looked out toward the open water. The horizon was dark, the last of the light fading behind layers of clouds. "When a thing from the deep follows you once," he said softly, "it might come back." A chill crawled up my spine. Keen whispered, "Why would it come back?" Eldon didn't answer. Because the real answer was the one none of us wanted to say. We were marked. By accident or by fate or by curiosity or by something older than we understood, the ocean had singled us out. We had taken something that belonged to the depths, something alive, something hunted, something unnatural, and the deep doesn't forget its wounds. As we checked equipment, I noticed something odd on the port side of the hull, tiny scratches, dozens. Thin lines carved lightly into the metal, barely visible unless you ran your fingers along them. They weren't there before. They weren't from buoys or debris. They looked like marks, testing pushes, soft touches, like fingertips brushing metal. Like something learning the shape of our boat. I felt sick. "Eldon," I called. He hurried over. When he saw the marks, he stared for a long moment before saying anything. "How deep?" he asked quietly. "Barely," I replied. "Not enough to weaken the hull." Keene joined us. His face turned white. "It touched us." "Recently," I said. Eldon touched the marks gently. "It knows our boat." Keene swallowed hard. "You think it was following us even closer than we realized?" "It was under Wren's boat when it tore it apart," I said. "Maybe it was under ours too, watching, studying." Keene backed away from the hull. "We need to leave. We need to move inland, away from the water, away from everything." Eldon didn't disagree, but the ocean had other plans. The radio crackled suddenly. A faint, static-filled message bled through. "Mayday, coordinates, taking water, repeat, taking water," the coordinates followed. And my heart stopped. Because they were only 6 miles from where the Pacific Torrent had been found. Keene covered his mouth. "Not again, not another boat." "Who is it?" I gasped. Eldon turned up the volume. The voice came through again, panicked, strained. "Something hit us, hull breach. We can't see, it's dark, something is under us." A sharp crack cut through the transmission. Then silence. Dead silence. Keene whispered, "We can't go there, we can't." Eldon stood frozen for a moment, torn between responsibility and terror. "We have to," he whispered. "No," Keene snapped. "We don't, that's death, you know that's death. We'd be sailing straight into whatever tore Wren's ship apart." Eldon looked between us, his hands shook. "I won't leave men to die," he said. Keene shook with anger and fear. "You will if it means saving your own life." Eldon glared at him. "You think I want to go? You think I don't know what's out there? But we're fishermen. We don't abandon people. We're prey," Keene growled. "Not rescuers, not anymore." I stepped between them. "Stop." Both fell silent. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "We're all thinking the same thing. That thing out there is hunting, it's chasing. Maybe ships, maybe signals, maybe movement, we don't know." Eldon looked at me with raw desperation. "Roar, if we don't help, who will?" I stared at the dark horizon. And I realized a horrible truth. We were the only ones who knew what was out there. We were the only ones who had seen it. We were the only ones who had survived it. If anyone could rescue those men, it was us. But if anyone could die trying, it was also us. The deep had called back. Now we had to choose whether to answer. The ocean was black. The radio was silent. The air was still. We stood on the deck, caught between duty and fear. Finally, Eldon said the words that sealed our fate. "We're going." Keene whispered, "Then we're dead." And for the first time in my life, I wondered if he was right. We left the harbor without speaking, each of us lost inside our own fear. The night was a heavy blanket stretched across the ocean, suffocating every light except the weak glow from our deck lamps. The moon hid behind thick clouds. No stars, no wind, no waves. The water looked like a massive slab of black glass, reflecting nothing, swallowing everything. The perfect kind of night for something huge to rise unseen, and we were heading straight toward it. As the harbor lights shrank behind us, Keene leaned close to me and whispered, "We shouldn't be doing this." His voice trembled. Keene wasn't the kind of man who scared easily, but fear had dug into him like hooks. "We can still turn back," he said. "We don't have to follow Eldon." But I knew we would, because the radio distress call wasn't just noise. It was human, panicked, real. Someone out there was alive, maybe. And no matter how terrified we were, we couldn't ignore it, even if it meant sailing straight into the jaws of something the ocean itself feared. Eldon didn't look back, didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. He sat rigid at the helm, jaw tight, eyes hollow. His face said more than words ever could. He was terrified, but he was going anyway. That's what captains do. They go, even when going means dying. We hit the 6-mile mark 30 minutes later. Location where the signal had come from. The same area where the Pacific Torrent had vanished. The same place where the sonar mass had hovered under us days earlier. The air grew colder. Not breeze cold, deep cold, the kind that seeps up from below like the ocean is exhaling frost. Keen hugged himself. "It's here," he whispered. "I can feel it." He wasn't wrong. The water had a strange movement, like something massive was shifting currents beneath us. Not rising, not attacking, just existing. Waiting. Eldon slowed the engine until the boat drifted. "All right," he said. "Lights on, all of them." Keen and I spread across the deck, switching on the spotlights, flood lamps, and beamers. Yellow-white cones cut through the darkness, reflecting off the black water, but the light didn't travel far. It was swallowed almost instantly, absorbed by the stillness of the surface. "I hate this," Keen muttered. "It feels like the ocean's eating the light." He was right. This wasn't normal water. This was deep water pretending to be shallow. Eldon radioed out. "Vessel in distress, this is the Marita. We are on site. Respond if you hear us." Nothing, static. He tried again. Nothing. Keen clutched the edge of the cabin doorway. "They're gone. Whatever happened, we're too late." But then a noise crackled through the radio, not static, not a voice, a low, rumbling vibration, like something huge shifting through liquid. Eldon's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," I whispered. But the sound didn't come from the radio. It came from the hull. A deep, soft thud pressed upward from beneath us. Then another, slow, rhythmic, measured, like something was brushing up against the underside of the boat. Keen stumbled backward. "No, no, no," the sonar beeped, once sharply like a cry. We ran into the cabin and stared at the screen. The depth reading spiked. A shape appeared. Not one this time, two masses, one enormous. A dark blot covering almost the entire lower portion of the display, and one smaller moving erratically like it was struggling. Keen's mouth dropped open. "It's the thing, the pale one, the one that escaped the tank. It's here." "And something is chasing it," I whispered. The small mass darted upward, fast, vertical, straight toward the surface, straight toward us. Eldon shouted, "Brace." We grabbed onto whatever we could, rails, ropes, equipment mounts. The water beneath us bulged. A pale shape exploded out of the ocean. It slammed onto the deck in a wet, violent heap, limbs twisting, skin gleaming like sickly porcelain in the floodlights. It convulsed, gasping without lungs, its narrow chest pumping in jerking motions. Keen shrieked. It's back, why is it here?" The creature splayed across the deck. Its limbs were too long, bending in unnatural angles. Its head was smooth and oval, with slits where a mouth should have been, but no eyes. No eyes at all. Just pale skin stretched tight over bone. It writhed, reaching for the deck rail with elongated fingers, trying to pull itself upright. But it was weak. Wounded, terrified, I felt my breath catch. This thing wasn't dangerous. Not compared to what hunted it. It looked like prey. A frightened animal trying to escape something worse. And the worst thing was rising behind it. The sonar flashed red. The larger mass ascended fast. "Get away from the rail," Eldon screamed. Keen and I stumbled backward. The water behind the boat lifted. Not splashed, not rippled, lifted. Like something massive displacing thousands of gallons of water was slowly pushing upward. The deck vibrated, the hull groaned, lights flickered. The pale creature screeched, its voice sharp, piercing, desperate, and crawled behind a coil of nets. The water reached its highest point, and then it fell. Collapsed inward as something enormous passed just beneath the surface. A shadow, so big it swallowed the ocean. So dense it distorted the floodlight beams as if bending light itself. The boat rocked wildly. Keen hit the deck hard. Eldon grabbed the console to keep from falling. I stood frozen, staring into the water, trying to understand what I was seeing. But the shadow was too massive to comprehend. It wasn't a whale, wasn't a shark, wasn't anything with a shape I understood. It moved like a mountain sliding underwater. A dark, rolling mass that breathed, flexed, and shifted as if it was made of both flesh and liquid. Then it passed beneath us. The lights flickered again. The creature on the deck shrieked louder, backing farther into the nets. Keen scrambled to his feet and pressed against the cabin wall. "Why is it following us? Why did it come to us?" "It's not following us," Eldon said quietly. His voice cracked. "It's following that." He pointed to the pale creature. The creature convulsed, pressing itself into the nets, trying to hide, trying to disappear, trying to escape. The sonar lit up again. The large mass circled beneath us, slow, intentional, predatory, and then it rose, not fast, not aggressive, just rising like something curious, like something tasting the shape of us. The hull vibrated under the pressure. Small scratches whispered against the metal, too many to count. Dozens, hundreds, like fingertips dragging softly. Keen clamped his hands over his ears. "It's touching us, it's touching the boat." "Don't move," Eldon whispered. "Don't make a sound." The scratches continued, long, slow, deliberate strokes. The pale creature on deck curled into a ball and shivered violently. The ocean around us grew warm, then hot. Steam lifted from the surface. The sonar beeped again, but this time the large mass sank, slowly, gradually descending into the dark. It didn't leave. It didn't flee. It just retreated. Like a predator stepping back into the shadows when the prey is cornered, waiting for a better moment. The water calmed. The warmth faded. The scratches stopped. Only then did Eldon whisper, "Roar, help me, move it." He nodded toward the pale creature. Keen stared at him like he was insane. "Move it where?" "Off the deck," Eldon said. "Into the water. It's what that thing wants." "It'll come back," Keen cried. "It'll chase us again." "It'll chase us worse if we keep what it's hunting," Eldon snapped. He wasn't wrong. Whatever that colossal thing was, it wasn't trying to kill us. Not yet. It wanted the pale creature. And as long as we kept it, we were between hunter and prey. The pale creature twitched weakly as we approached. Its skin felt rubbery and cold when I touched it, too cold, like touching a dead fish. But it was breathing, if that jerking motion was breathing. It didn't fight us. It didn't bite. It didn't struggle. It was exhausted, broken, terrified. It wanted to go back into the water, or it wanted the nightmare beneath us to go away. We dragged it to the rail. Keen shook violently. "Roar, don't drop it, don't." But Eldon placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have to." Together, we lifted the creature. It made a soft, weak sound, almost pleading. I hesitated. Then Eldon whispered, "This isn't our world." And we let it go. The pale creature slipped beneath the water with barely a splash. The surface rippled. Then silence, deep, endless silence. The sonar flickered. A mass sank deeper, 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 until the screen cleared and nothing remained. Eldon exhaled shakily. "We're leaving." No one argued. We sped back toward the harbor, running the engine harder than we ever had before. Behind us, the ocean stayed dark. But for the first time, I didn't feel like it was chasing. I felt like it was watching, waiting, learning. The deep had taken back what belonged to it, and now it knew us. It knew our boat. It knew our patterns. It knew our fear. And somehow deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. This was only the beginning. We reached the harbor just before dawn. The sky was still dark, but the faintest hint of pale blue clung to the eastern horizon, thin as a knife's edge. The sea behind us was flat and silent, but I kept turning, staring into the black water as if expecting that massive shape to rise again, to follow us into the harbor, to drag us back out into the deep. But nothing broke the surface. Nothing chased us. Nothing moved. It was the stillness that terrified me the most. Keen leapt off the boat the second we tied to the dock. He didn't even bother securing the last knot, just wrapped the rope once and scrambled away like the boards might collapse beneath him. "I'm done," he muttered. "I'm finished. I mean it this time. I'm not going back out there. Not ever." He staggered toward the lot, shaking like he was freezing even though the air was mild. He didn't turn around when I called his name. Didn't slow down, didn't look back. Eldon watched him go, jaw tight. "He needs time," he said quietly. "Do we have time?" I asked. Eldon didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. Time wasn't ours anymore. The deep creature had marked us, whether by scent, sound, awareness, or something older and stranger. And time was nothing to something that had lived in the dark pressure of the ocean for longer than humans had ever looked at maps. But exhaustion took over, and the three of us parted ways without arguing. I walked home in silence, my mind replaying the night in flashes. The pale creature's gasp, the massive shadow circling us, the scratches along the hull, the warmth rising from the water, the way the deep thing sank only after it reclaimed its prey. I could still feel the vibration in my bones. It was almost sunrise by the time I stepped inside my apartment. I locked the door, pulled the curtains, sat in a chair without removing my jacket, and stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. Finally, when my adrenaline burned out, I collapsed into bed. I woke to pounding, loud, frantic knocking that ripped me from sleep so violently I didn't even understand what was happening at first. It was afternoon. Bright light seeped through the blinds. My heart hammered in my chest. The knocking continued. Then Keen's voice. Roar, roar, open up, open the damn door. I scrambled up, half dizzy, and yanked the door open. Keen shoved past me, pacing like a trapped animal. His hair was a mess, his eyes bloodshot, and his breath came in shallow gasps. Keen, I said. What? It's back, he said immediately. It came to the harbor. My stomach turned to ice. What do you mean? It was under the docks, he shouted. I heard it, the same vibration, the same scraping sound from the hull that night. I froze. Keen grabbed my arm, fingers digging in hard. Roar, I'm not imagining things, I know that sound, we both do. Did you see anything? No, he said, shaking his head violently. But I heard it, quiet, slow, like it was moving between the pilings under our boats, like it was looking. I swallowed hard. For what? Keen stared at me, his expression twisted. For us. He let go of my arm and walked to the window, staring out toward the distant shimmer of the harbor. I thought leaving the water would make me feel better, but it followed. It came all the way into the bay. That's impossible, I whispered. It's too big to enter the harbor. Keen spun around. You saw what it did to the Pacific Torrent. You saw how it moved. How do we know what's impossible anymore? I didn't argue. I couldn't. My mind was spinning. The deep thing had risen beneath us twice. It had circled our boat like a predator. It had tracked the pale creature across miles of ocean. It had found Ren. It had torn apart a vessel like it was paper. Why wouldn't it come into shallow waters? Why wouldn't it search? Something cold sank into my stomach. Did it hit any boats? No, Keen said, but something else happened. He looked down at his hands, trembling slightly. I went to check the slip where the Pacific Torrent used to be, just to, I don't know, pay respect, I guess. He swallowed, and I found marks. Marks, he nodded, scratches, not deep, but long. Dozens of them along the pilings, just like the ones on our hull. My mouth went dry. It was here, Keen whispered. It touched the wood, it touched the harbor, it was searching. A chill ran up my arms. Where's Eldon? I asked. Keen hesitated. That's why I came. He's not answering his radio or phone. I checked the harbor. He's not on the boat. I grabbed my coat. Let's go. We reached Eldon's house 20 minutes later. His truck was in the driveway. The porch light was on, even though it was daytime. The door was unlocked. That alone told me something was wrong. Eldon didn't leave doors unlocked. Keen entered first, calling out softly, Eldon, you hear? No answer. We moved through the house slowly, living room empty, kitchen empty, hallway empty. Then we reached the back door, the one that led to the small wooden pier behind his house. The door was cracked open. Cold air seeped into the house. Keen looked at me, pale. We stepped onto the back porch. The wooden planks were wet, not from rain. There hadn't been rain in days. The water in the small inlet behind Eldon's house was unnaturally still, completely flat like someone had poured oil across the surface. Something dark floated near the edge of the pier. I moved closer. It was Eldon's radio, broken, crushed inward like something had squeezed it with incredible force. Keen whispered, where is he? I scanned the pier. That's when I saw the footprints, not boots, not bare feet. Long, thin imprints leading toward the very end of the pier. Elongated, uneven, almost webbed, not human, not exactly like the pale creature we dragged from the hold, something else. Something that had followed Eldon here, something that had walked on land. Keen stumbled back. No, it can't come on land, it can't. But the footprints said otherwise. They ended at the edge of the pier like something had stood there, watching the water, waiting. Then the planks beneath the footprints had faint scratches, small, thin, deliberate like fingertips touching wood. Something had reached up, or something had climbed out, or both. I felt my pulse thudding in my ears, checked the shore. We spread apart. Keen moved toward the left bank. I stayed near the pier, then I saw something caught on one of the lower boards. Fabric. I crouched, heart pounding. It was a torn piece of Eldon's jacket, the same jacket he'd been wearing last night. Keen collapsed to his knees. No. Eldon, no. I held the fabric tightly, my hands shaking. The deep had followed him home. It had found him, it had taken him, but why? I stared at the water, the surface reflecting the gray sky. The pale creature had been prey, but Eldon had not been prey. He had been something else, a witness, a thief, a trespasser. Keen spoke through clenched teeth. Roar, we have to leave town, everything, we have to go now. I didn't answer because something near the inlet moved, a small ripple, then another. Then a sound, a low vibration rising from beneath the water, faint but unmistakable. The same sound we'd heard under the boat. Keen grabbed my arm. Roar, run, but I couldn't, because in that moment the truth hit me like a strike of lightning. The deep creature wasn't wandering randomly. It wasn't following the pale thing anymore. It wasn't circling boats without purpose. It was searching for us. It remembered the boat. It remembered the hull. It remembered the vibration of our engine. It remembered the sound of our voices. It remembered the shape of Eldon's movements. It remembered where he lived. It had marked us, one by one, and now it wanted the rest. Keen tugged me harder. Roar, please run. But I kept staring at the water, because beneath the inlet's surface something massive moved, slowly, deliberately, closer. And I finally understood, the ocean doesn't forget. It comes to collect. Keen kept pulling at my arm, begging me to move, but I couldn't. I couldn't look away from the water, because something beneath that inlet, something larger than anything that should ever come that close to shore, was moving. Slow, heavy waves rippled outward from the center of the inlet, not caused by wind, not by tide. Something alive was shifting just below the surface, pushing water upward in wide, deliberate pulses. The boards of the pier creaked beneath my feet. Keen whispered, Roar, please, please, if we don't leave now. His voice cut off. The water bulged. A dome of dark liquid rose upward like a massive back breaking the surface, but it didn't breach. It simply lifted and settled again, as if an enormous body were gliding slowly beneath, just deep enough to remain unseen. Keen stumbled backward. It followed him, and now it's following us. The water moved again, closer this time. A vibration rolled through the pier, subtle but unmistakable. The wood shivered under our boots. The sound wasn't loud, but it had weight. Like pressure radiating upward from the depths, humming inside the bones instead of the ears. I had felt that vibration before, in the hold, under the cabin floor, across the hull at 3 a.m. when the deep creature had tracked the pale thing to our boat. Now that vibration was under Eldon's dock, under us. Keen backed toward the house. Roar, we're dead if we stay here. We need to get off the water. My legs finally moved. We ran up the pier, across the back porch, through Eldon's open door. Inside the house, the air felt thick. Cold drafts moved across the floor like fingers tracing the wood. The stillness pressed against my skin. Keen slammed the back door shut and locked it. Then he shoved a table in front of it, hands trembling. He looked around the empty house with wide eyes. He's gone, he whispered. Eldon's gone. It took him. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure he was dead. I wasn't sure he was alive either. But if something wanted him alive, I didn't want to know why. We stood in the middle of the kitchen listening. Only our breathing filled the air. Then thud, the whole house shook. Keen's head snapped toward the back door. No, 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 thud, harder this time, a deep impact, not against the door, against the foundation. Like something huge pressed against the house from underneath the wooden supports. The lights flickered. Roar, Keen whispered, it's under us. The floorboards vibrated, dust fell from the ceiling. A low hum rolled through the walls. It was the same sound. The same vibration we'd felt beneath our boat. The same pattern, the same presence. The deep thing had found Eldon, and now it had followed his trail to us. I grabbed Keen's arm. We need to get out of here, now. The front door was our only chance. The house was built close to the water with the inlet running behind it. If the creature was underneath, it wouldn't reach the street easily. We ran across the living room, down the hallway, past Eldon's empty boots on the mat. Keen reached the front door first, yanking it open, then froze, not because of something outside, but because of something inside the house. A sound drifted from the hallway behind us, a soft, wet dragging, as if something slick was being pulled across wood, slowly, carefully, deliberately. Keen's voice cracked. "Roar, what is that?" We both turned. Something lay in the hallway, something pale. At first, I thought it was the same creature we dropped into the ocean. My body froze, my hands cold. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was different, smaller, thinner. Its limbs shorter and less defined, its skin a faint translucent gray instead of pure white, its shape less complete, like muscles still forming under the surface. Like it wasn't fully grown, or like it was growing, right now. The pale shape twitched, its body flexed. The skin rippled like something inside it was moving, like it was forming, reshaping itself. Keen stumbled backward. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I whispered. But in the back of my mind, a thought clawed at me, the creature we threw back that wasn't the only one. Something else came with it, or followed it, or was left behind by it. The pale figure made a soft clicking sound, not a scream, not a growl, a communication. From outside, the deep vibration responded. The house shuddered. Keen grabbed my sleeve. "We're surrounded." "Move," I said. We darted out the front door, sprinting across the small yard toward the street. The air was cold and sharp. The sky was a dark smear overhead. The harbor was only a quarter-mile away, but I couldn't hear any boats, any voices, only the distant echo of waves. We kept running, but behind us wood split. The house groaned, and then a massive splash from the inlet. Keen grabbed my hand. "Run faster." We sprinted down the street, our boots slamming pavement. The road was empty, not a single car, not a single person, just us, shadows running beneath pale streetlights. Halfway up the slope toward town center, Keen stopped suddenly. "Roar, look." I turned and I saw movement, not in the street, not on the pier, but in the waterways running through the town. Black water surged in the canal lines behind houses the way tides swell before storms, not natural, not rhythmic. Something was moving beneath the connected channels of the harbor town. Following, searching. Keen's voice trembled. "It's using the water paths, it's moving through them, like veins." The realization hit us both. The inlet behind Eldon's house wasn't an isolated spot. It connected to a web of waterways, small channels, tide lines, drainage runs. The creature had access to the entire town through the water beneath it. It wasn't just at Eldon's house. It could be anywhere, inside any canal, under any pier, beneath any floor built over wet ground. It was hunting through the waterways. Keen grabbed my shoulders. "We need to warn people." "Yes," I whispered. "But who will believe us?" Before he could answer, a sound filled the air. Not from the water, not from behind, from above. A faint, distant whine, a boat engine. We ran toward the harbor hill, climbing fast. As we crested the rise, the entire harbor came into view. The sight made my blood run cold. Boats rocked violently against their moorings, not from wind, not from waves, but from something shifting beneath them. Water sloshed in unnatural patterns, swirling around pilings. Lights flickered across the docks. Then a small fishing boat, one of the oldest models in the harbor, rose upward suddenly, its starboard side lifting 3 feet out of the water before slamming down again with a deafening crack. Keen gasped. "It's under the harbor." I grabbed his arm. "We need to help whoever's on that boat." We sprinted downhill toward the docks, but halfway there, the water exploded. A geyser of black seawater shot upward between the vessels, drenching the walkways. Something massive moved beneath the surface, churning the water like a living storm. A low vibration rolled through the docks. The pilings shook, ropes snapped, metal groaned. A spotlight from one of the boats skittered across the water and landed on something rising. Not the full creature, not yet, just a shape, a curve, a ridge, a long, massive arc of dark flesh that disappeared back under with a slow, powerful motion. Not fast, not frantic, controlled, like it was testing the space, feeling the angles. Mapping every boat, every walkway, every escape route, my lungs tight. "Roar," Keen whispered. "It's searching for us." The truth hit me like a wave. We had brought something back from the deep. Something that didn't belong in shallow water, something that learned, something that adapted, something that could follow currents like trails, something ancient enough to move through waterways as easily as the open ocean. And now it was hunting in the harbor, not for food, not for territory, but for people, for us. "Where do we go?" Keen whispered. I scanned the harbor, boats slammed against docks. Lights flickered, the water churned. A deep vibration pulsed like a heartbeat rising from the depths. I didn't have an answer, but then a voice called out from the far pier. "Hey, over here." I whipped around. A figure stood beside a small emergency craft, a harbor rescue skiff, waving us over. "Come on, move." Keen stared. "Who?" "Doesn't matter," I yelled. "Run." We sprinted along the boardwalk as the water beneath us swelled, bulging upward like something massive pressed against the underside of the dock. Boards creaked, bolts groaned. The creature was inches beneath us. We leapt onto the rescue skiff just as the dock behind us cracked in half. "Gio!" I screamed. The man hit the throttle. The engine roared, the boat shot forward, and behind us the dark water erupted. Something enormous rose beneath the docks, shattering pilings like matchsticks. Water surged outward in a violent bloom, but we were already moving. For the moment, we were alive, but the ocean wasn't finished. It never was, and the deep always calls again. If you want part 11, just say next, and I'll continue with another one, 401, 500 words in the same exact tone and detail. You said, PLZ next, but make sure each part length should be of 1,500 words. ChatGPT said, understood. The rescue skiff tore away from the collapsing docks, its small engine screaming under the sudden strain. Spray blasted across my face as the craft cut through the black, churning water. Behind us, the harbor groaned under stress it was never built to withstand. Pilings snapping, wood splintering, fishermen shouting in confusion and terror. But none of them saw what we saw. None of them understood what was under the water with us. None of them knew the deep had come to their doorstep. Keen fell onto the bench beside me, coughing hard, eyes wild. The man piloting the skiff shouted over the engine roar, "What the hell happened? You two okay?" He looked familiar. Mid-40s, dark beard, harbor master jacket, the kind who'd seen storms, drunks, and breakdowns 1,000 times. But he hadn't seen this. Keen wheezed out, "Just go, faster." The harbor master didn't argue. He shoved the throttle forward. The engine screamed louder. The little boat lifted slightly as it gained speed, bouncing over the rough water. Behind us, the harbor lights flickered, reflecting off the rising swells. Not natural waves, pressure waves, the kind that come from something enormous shifting beneath the surface. "Is anyone else out there?" The harbor master yelled. I didn't know how to answer. Were there other people still on the docks? Probably. Were they in danger? Absolutely. But I didn't know what to tell him. I didn't know what words could capture the reality of what was happening, so I said the only thing that mattered. "Don't go back there." He frowned. "What? Why not?" Keen turned, face pale. "Something S in the harbor." The man snorted in disbelief. "Yeah, big damn waves and maybe a broken main line. Something must have ruptured underwater, but it'll settle." "No," Keen said shakily. "It's alive." The harbor master shot him a sharp look. "Are you two drunk?" I snapped, "Look behind us if you think we're joking." He turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder. His face changed instantly. The water behind the docks wasn't rippling. It was bulging, rising in rounded, heavy swells like something enormous was shifting underneath. The surviving dock sections heaved upward, then snapped downward violently. The harbor master gripped the wheel tighter. That's not natural." "No," I said quietly. "It's not." He swallowed and kept driving. The skiff roared across the bay, the water slapping against the hull hard enough to rattle my teeth. The sky above us was still an endless black sheet. No moon, no stars, just darkness pressing down from above and rising from below. As we sped farther from the harbor, the violent water behind us slowly calmed. But the silence that followed was worse than the chaos, because silence meant the thing in the deep had stopped moving, or had sunk again, or had followed. The harbor master slowed the engine as we reached the far side of the bay. "All right," he said breathlessly. Tell me what's happening and don't give me supernatural crap. I need facts. Keen shook his head. You're not going to believe the truth. Try me. I looked at the man, really looked at him. He was steady, focused. The kind of person who'd risk their life for strangers, but he wasn't prepared for what the ocean had become. Still, he had saved our lives. He deserved something. So I said, 3 boats have gone missing in the last week. His brow furrowed. Yeah, I know, Torrin's boat, the Lark, and another one 2 nights ago. We've been looking all day. They weren't accidents, I said. He blinked. What? Something about saying it out loud made my skin crawl, but I kept going. Something in the deep tore them apart. The harbor master's hands tightened on the wheel. What tore them apart? I don't know what it is. I don't think anyone does. I pointed toward the dark water behind us, but it followed one of those boats. It followed ours too. Keen added, voice shaking, and it followed our friend home. The harbor master stared at him. Come again. It came up the inlet behind his house, I said. It dragged Eldon into the water. The man's face drained of color. Dragged him where? I shook my head. Into the deep. For a moment, no one spoke. The water beneath the skiff gurgled quietly. The sound was soft, but it made my blood run cold. The harbor master looked over the side, uneasy. All right, he said, voice low. Say I believe you. Say something is down there. Why the hell did it come into the harbor? Why here? Why now? Keen took a long breath. Because we brought something back from the deep. Something that didn't belong to the surface. It chased it. It hunted it. It followed it to our boat. He swallowed hard. And now it's following us. The harbor master stared at us like we were describing a nightmare he desperately wanted to wake from. But something in our faces must have convinced him. Or maybe it was the harbor's destruction he just witnessed. Either way, he finally said, where are we going now? I answered without thinking, away from the water. The harbor master nodded. I can bring us to the south pier. It's shallow there. Concrete breakwater. If something big tries to follow, it'll beach itself. And if it does? Keen asked. The man didn't answer, but the silence told us everything. The engine revved, pushing the skiff toward the far side of town. The water grew calmer as we approached the breakwater, a long stretch of stone rising above the bay like a scar. Relief washed through me. If the deep thing was truly massive, bigger than any creature I'd ever imagined, then shallow water might slow it, confuse it, trap it. We're almost there, the harbor master called. But the ocean didn't want us reaching safety. Not yet. Not ever. The water behind us thumped. A deep impact, like something huge had struck the seafloor. The vibration rolled through the hull. Keen clutched the bench. No, it followed us. It's underneath. Hold on, the harbor master shouted. The skiff lurched forward as he pushed the throttle to its limit. The water churned violently behind us, dark swirls rising like ink in a bowl. The waves flattened, then rolled outward as if something massive was pushing water away from itself. Faster, I yelled. I am. The harbor master barked. The skiff reached the edge of the breakwater where the water depth dropped sharply. The harbor master swung the boat hard left. Get ready to jump. What? Keen shouted. The boat can't go any further. The prop will shatter on the rocks. You have to jump. Keen looked at me, panicked. Roar, can it walk on land? I didn't know, but the pale creature had walked, or at least something like it had. My chest tightened. We don't have a choice. The skiff scraped along the last stretch of water before the rocks. The harbor master braced himself. Go now. I grabbed Keen's arm and leapt. Cold air rushed past my face. Hard stone slammed into my knees and palms. Keen landed beside me with a grunt of pain. The harbor master killed the engine and jumped out himself. Move, he barked. Up the rocks, we scrambled, clambering upward on the sharp stone. Hands slipping, knees scraping, breath burning in our lungs. Behind us, the water rose, not splashed, rose like something enormous pushed upward beneath it. The harbor master risked a glance and froze. Oh my God, I turned. A dome of water lifted 4 feet into the air, then 6, then 8. The shape beneath it was too large to fully process, a vast, rolling curve of something that distorted the surface. A body with no clear edges, a shadow with no definite form. a mountain of muscle and darkness bending the sea around it. Keen screamed, "Run!" We scrambled up the breakwater, the rocks tearing into our palms. A deafening whump sounded behind us as the thing struck the underside of the stones. The entire breakwater shook. Cracks ripped through the concrete. Chunks of stone fell into the water. We reached the top, panting, terrified. The harbor master yelled, "Don't look, just move." But I looked, and what I saw I will never forget. The water pulled back, just a little, just enough to reveal something rising beneath. Not fully. Not even a fraction, just the hint of a shape. A smooth, massive curve. Dark gray, blotched, not skin, not scales, something else. And slid across that curve, long, narrow, and alive, a glowing seam pulsed. Red, dim at first, then brighter, a line of light in the darkness. Not eyes, something worse, something like an opening. A sensory slit. A perception organ. It glowed brighter as it scanned the rocks, as it scanned us. And I realized with a cold horror that shook me to the core, it wasn't hunting by sight or by sound. It hunted by memory. It remembered our boat, our movements, our vibrations, our voice patterns, our bodies. It remembered us. The slit pulsed one last time. Then the mass sank back into the depths, dragging the water with it in a spiral that churned the bay into chaos. Silence followed, not safety, not peace, just silence. The kind that warns, the kind that promises this is not over. We stayed on top of the breakwater until the sun finally rose. 3 shaking silhouettes perched on cold stone, staring at a harbor that no longer looked like a safe place on Earth. Gray morning light spread slowly across the devastated waterfront. Boats lay half-sunken or listing sideways. Crushed pilings stuck out of the water like broken ribs. Wooden planks floated aimlessly across the bay. It looked like a storm had rolled through, but the sky had been clear all night. No storm had done this. The deep had. Keen hugged his knees to his chest. His clothes were soaked from the spray. His breathing still came in short, fast bursts. The harbor master, whose name we finally learned was Dallin, stood at the edge of the breakwater, staring at the water with a look I'd never seen on a man like him. Harbor masters aren't afraid of much. They deal with wrecks, storms, fires, drunk fishermen, rogue waves. But Dallin wasn't staring like someone trying to figure out what to do. He was staring like someone trying to understand how his world had been ripped open in a single night. Finally, he spoke, quietly, without looking at us. "You weren't lying." Keen let out a broken laugh. "Told you." Dallin's jaw tight. "That thing wasn't a fish, wasn't a whale, wasn't anything we know." "No," I said, "it's not from our world." He turned sharply. "What does that mean?" I hesitated. The words felt heavy on my tongue, but they were the only ones that felt true. "It's from below, from deeper than we've ever gone, deeper than we can survive." Keen swallowed hard. "And it's not alone." Dallin's eyes narrowed. "You said something earlier about bringing something back, something that didn't belong to the surface. Explain." I did, everything. Starting with the night the first net came up, cut clean and circular, something no natural creature should have been able to do. The pale limb we'd found in the fish. The storm, the thing in the ice tank. The creature that climbed onto our deck. The massive shadow that chased it, the vibrations in the hull, the torn Pacific Tauren, the calls, the scratches, the way Eldon vanished, the thing crawling inside his house. How the deep followed currents and inlets to track him, to track us. By the time I finished, Dallin looked like he was balancing on the edge of disbelief and horror. Keen added quietly, "It learns, it listens, it remembers." Dallin let out a shaky breath. "And now it knows this harbor." I didn't want to say it, but I had to. It knows us. We climbed down from the breakwater once the water calmed. Dallin led us across the debris-scattered shoreline. Seagulls circled above, confused by the chaos. A few fishermen stood at the dock edge, staring at the destruction, murmuring about a freak underwater tremor or a collapsed pipeline. If only. We moved toward Dallin's office, a small building near the main pier. Keen kept looking behind him every few steps, jumping at every splash from the water. Inside, Dallin locked the door and pulled curtains shut. His hands shook slightly as he poured 3 cups of coffee. He slid one to me, one to Keen. then sat heavily with his own. "I need answers," he said, "and I need them fast." I rubbed my temples. "We don't have answers, we only have what we've seen." Keen leaned forward. "And what we've seen is that it's coming closer each time. It's adapting. It's pushing limits." Dallin frowned. "Why?" We stayed silent because none of us really knew. After a moment, Dallin said, "This might sound insane, but maybe the creature thinks you stole its offspring or its property or something important." "It wasn't offspring," I said quickly. "The pale thing wasn't a child. It was older than us, stronger, wrong in ways I can't explain." Keen nodded. "It was like a scout or a stray, something from lower water levels. And something much bigger tracked it to us." Dallin rubbed his face. "So we didn't take its child, we took its target." "Yes, and now it wants the rest." He stared into his coffee, hands trembling. "Then we need to leave this town," he said. "All of us, today, right now." Keen exhaled in relief. Finally, someone with sense, but I didn't speak, because leaving wouldn't solve anything. The deep had followed us across miles of ocean, into a harbor, into Eldon's house. If it wanted us badly enough, distance wouldn't matter. Dallin must have noticed my silence. "You disagree?" I slowly set my cup down. "It followed Eldon home." Keen's eyes widened. "Roar, no, don't say that. Don't say it can go beyond water." "It doesn't need to walk on land," I said quietly. "It just needs connection." "What do you mean?" Dallin asked. "Waterways," I said. "Everywhere in this town. Under houses, under sidewalks, under storage yards, the drainage lines, the inlets. The tidal runoffs. It doesn't need to walk uphill, it moves through water." Keen covered his face. "So leaving town won't matter." "If the town has water," I said, "it can move." Dallin stood abruptly. "We need authorities, state environmental, Coast Guard, someone." Keen laughed bitterly. "And tell them what? A deep-sea monster is hunting us. Please close the ocean. They'll lock us up." Dallin opened his mouth to argue, but the office lights flickered, buzzed, dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. Not from a power issue, something else, something that made my skin tight. Keen whispered, "It's here." Dallin shook his head. "It can't be, we're on land, solid land." But the lights dimmed a third time, this time slower. The floor vibrated, barely, softly. A subtle hum humming through the ground, not from above, from below. "Under the building," I whispered. Dallin's face went white. He slammed his hand on the desk and grabbed his radio. "All units, harbor alert, code red, stay off the docks and away from the east channels, repeat, move inland." The radio cut out. A sharp static burst, then silence. Keen backed away from the wall. "Roar, look." The framed map on the wall trembled just a little, just enough to rattle. The vibration grew, a heavy, low-frequency pulse, like something enormous pressing against mud and stone beneath us, sending sound up through the earth. Dallin grabbed his keys. "We're leaving right now." We rushed toward the door. He yanked it open and froze. A long, thin trail of water snaked across the ground outside, leading from the direction of the nearest water channel. Keen's breath hitched. "It's using the water, it's sending something." I stepped forward cautiously. The water trail wasn't still, it pulsed, shifted, moved, like something had slid across the concrete or been dragged or crawled, something pale, something like the thing we found in Eldon's hallway, something smaller, something faster. "We go," Dallin whispered. "Now," but before we could step out, something splashed in the channel beyond the buildings. A heavy splash, too heavy for a fish, too heavy for a person. Another splash followed, closer, louder. Then the sound of water trickling, not like waves, but like something wet moving across concrete. Keen grabbed my arm. "The rescue skiff, did we leave something on it?" A sickening realization hit me. We'd dropped the pale creature off our boat, but we never checked if it was the only one, something small. Something following currents. Something that learns, had it clung to the skiff, hidden in its hull well, slipped free when we jumped, or been carried in by the larger creature. Dallin whispered, "We need to get to my truck. It's 2 buildings over if we can reach the main road." A wet dragging sound cut him off. Behind the office, something was moving there, slow and soft, but heavy. We crept around the corner. Dallin peeked first and cursed under his breath. Something pale and thin crawled across the concrete behind the building. Long limbs, no eyes. skin stretched too tightly over a spindly frame. It wasn't the same one from Eldon's house. It was shorter, even more incomplete, almost larval, and it was sniffing the air without a nose, following vibrations, following us. Keen's breath trembled. "Kill it, kill it, kill it." "No," I whispered. "If we touch it, the big one will know exactly where we are." Dallin grabbed his keys. We run, quiet but fast. Not toward it, around the opposite side. "Follow me, stay low, no yelling, no metal sounds." We crouched and crept along the outer wall. The pale thing froze, its head lifted. Its long fingers scraped softly against the concrete. I stopped breathing. Dallin stopped moving. Keen's hand shook on my shoulder. After a long moment, the creature scuttled away, dragged by its strange limbs, toward the water. We held our breath until it slipped into a drainage gutter with a wet slither. Only then did Dallin whisper, "Go." We ran past the building, across the back lot, toward the parking area. Dallin's truck waited there, an old steel Ford that looked like it could take a beating. We reached it. He hit the unlock button. The lights blinked. A huge mistake. A ripple spread through a nearby canal, fast, direct, purposeful. Keen screamed, "G.O." We dove into the truck. Dallin jammed the key in. The engine roared, and somewhere behind the parking lot, the water exploded. Something massive was coming. Over water, underwater, through water, and now through town. Dallin slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The tires screeched, and the deep came after us, this time on our streets. Dallin hammered the truck into motion before any of us had time to fully understand what had just happened. The tires screamed as we shot out of the lot. The headlights carved bright paths through the gray morning fog. Behind us, a sound rose from the water that I will never forget. A long, low boom that felt as if the earth itself were exhaling. It reverberated through the truck like a bass note in a body cavity. People flinched and looked up from the sidewalks. Dogs barked, then stopped mid-bark. The town's morning bustle stuttered as if a giant hand had pressed pause. Keen pressed his forehead to the glass and peered back. "It's moving on the surface," he whispered. He didn't finish because the water behind the harbor began to churn in a broad, rolling surge. Boats that had survived the first night were now tossed like toys. A tall mast snapped against a cleat and flew into the air, landing with a shriek and a spray. Dallin swore under his breath. "I don't want to see what it looks like." He drove faster. We tore down the shoreline road, past shuttered storefronts and crews of people staring at the water, mouths open. Most were frozen in fear. Some were running. The radio in the truck crackled with short, frantic calls, maydays, repeating coordinates, voices we couldn't make sense of through the static. A child standing on the sidewalk watched us go by and waved a small plastic bucket toward the water as if offering it. The sight of that innocent gesture in a world that had already gone sideways hit me like a dull pain. I turned my head away. Dallin took the coastal road that skirted the worst of the harbor. We needed to get to the highway, to somewhere inland, somewhere the water couldn't reach. But as we passed the Marina Plaza, the whole ground seemed to breathe out. An enormous shift, and a wall of water rolled across the road farther ahead. Not a tsunami, not a curl, just a crushing, smooth slab moving at incredible speed. Dallin slammed the truck into reverse. The wheels spun. Gravel flew. The truck fishtailed, then righted. We all yelled. In the rear window, the wall of water hit the line of boats, then the dock, then poured over the road like a dark, slow avalanche. The sound was bone deep, 1,000 tons of water slapping composite and wood and steel. We were not going to make it over that stretch. "We'll go inland cross street," Dallin spat, turning the wheel hard. "There's a route through the marshlands, less water, more land." Keen grabbed my arm. "We can't keep running like this," he said, voice raw. "We have to stop somewhere and think." "Thinking won't keep it away," I answered. "Neither will staying. We have to keep moving until we find higher ground, a place it can't reach." Dallin saw his chance in a narrow lane between two warehouses. It was muddy and half-blocked by a delivery trailer. He shot the truck through anyway, grinding past the trailer by inches. For a moment it looked like the truck would snag, but we made it. Then the radio went dead. Just a little click and static filled the cab like snow. "No signal," Dallin muttered. He mashed the dial. Nothing. A siren wailed in the distance. Not the neat civil sound of police or ambulance. An ugly animal sound that started high and dove low like a wounded horn. The town's emergency sirens were designed to bring order. Instead, they did the opposite, a raw panic that pushed people into motion without telling them where to go. We crept through the maze of side streets. Water gleamed in every low place. Cars were abandoned with doors open, radios playing, half-eaten lunches on seats. Someone had left a bicycle on its side in the gutter, no one around. The town looked like a movie set after an evacuation, but with one key difference. The water kept moving like a living thing, pooling and sucking at the edges of sidewalks, slithering into basements through broken windows. At the edge of town, the road split. Dallin pulled the truck up short. The highway bridge ahead had been put up as a temporary ramp during a storm months back. It was the only route over the marshlands that didn't run near the water. But in the distance, I could see the bridge's far supports glinting with seawater. Whatever was moving had reached them. "I don't like this," Keene whispered. He hadn't stopped trembling. "We have to try," Dallin said. He pushed the truck forward. We rolled across the rickety bridge slow, each board flexing under us. The wind whipped our faces. The truck's engine put out a steady, small hum, almost comforting. As we crossed the bridge, I saw something move beneath the surface near one of the supports. A long, pale limb slid along the submerged support like a hand testing a railing. It paused, then released. My stomach dropped. It was unlike anything I'd seen. A long, jointed appendage with useless-looking fingers, slick and pale. It seemed to be tasting the air. The truck hit the far side of the bridge and splashed into a shallow pool of runoff. We were out of town proper, into the flat, flooded marsh. The road ahead rose gently into farmland. The land here sloped upward gently, and the nearest hill, an old drainage mound with a line of pines, was our best bet. Dallin drove toward it, tires complaining. We left the coast behind and climbed that small slope. The air felt different, less of the metallic, salt-laced press that had sat on the harbor. It was still moist, but not as viscous as the water near the docks. We stopped at the top of the mound. Below us, the water spread like a dark mirror, dotted with wreckage and drifting objects. People were visible in the far distance, tiny splashes of movement, some waving, some climbing trees, some on the roofs of cars. A cluster of vehicles huddled near the old farmhouse at the highest point of the ridge. Smoke rose from a small fire. Someone had a radio on with clear voice for the first time in hours. "Anyone on Hillcrest, we're forming a line. Help the injured." Medical supplies needed. For the first time since the deep crawled into our harbor, I felt a small, brittle thing like hope. Not because we were safe, far from it, but because we were not alone anymore. People were gathering. Options existed. We climbed out, legs numb from sitting. Dallin locked the truck and hefted a canvas bag over his shoulder. The farmhouse looked abandoned but serviceable. Stone foundation, high ground, a wraparound porch. We moved toward it with other refugees, farmers, fishermen, a few teenagers carrying a soaked mattress. A woman with a baby in a sling looked at us hard. "You saw it?" she asked. I nodded. "At the harbor." She breathed out like someone who'd been holding their breath for days. "We thought it was just storms, but then it crawled the canals, took old man Hargreaves out of his boat, came up the drainage near the feed store, ate the water pump, took his dog, don't know how to stop it." People exchanged stories, snatches of terror passing like currency. A man with a fishing knife said, "It's getting smarter. It isn't just brute force. It uses the currents, the pipes, the tide. It hunts patterns. It remembers routines like a trapper remembers tracks." I thought of the pale things, the smaller limbs that crawled like parasites. "It's breeding," I heard myself say before I could stop it. The words hung in the air, heavier than any of us wanted. No one contradicted me. An old lady near the fire looked at me with a kind of cruel patience. "The sea always had things we don't know," she said, "but we never baited them before." Her eyes wandered to the group of men who'd fought the first night, the ones who'd been on boats with us. They didn't meet her gaze. "We shouldn't have kept the thing," she said softly. "We shouldn't have brought it in." Guilt sank into my chest like a weight. Kept it, packed it, dropped it, even for a moment. Tiny acts with giant consequences. As the daylight strengthened, leaders formed. Dallin and a half-dozen farmers set up a plan to provide food and search parties. Some wanted to burn the docks and destroy any remaining boats. Others argued that boat engines could be used to herd the thing out to deep water and trap it. The pragmatic bickering of humans in crisis made me ache with relief. For now, people were doing what people do, organizing, assigning, moving. But that night we slept poorly. At intervals I woke to the sound of the marsh, ripples, distant sloshes, the odd splash that could be a deer or a man or something else. In the morning, the pile of small tragedies we'd seen in town had a new headline. More boats missing, more strange marks on pilings, the radio saying with increasing panic that the line of whatever it was had extended further along the coast. We had bought time by fleeing inland, not safety. The thing from the deep had turned a whole harbor into the first line of a new map. But maps change, paths redraw, patterns shift, and for the first time since the night the net was cut, I realized the worst part wasn't what we'd seen, it was that the ocean remembered us. It had marked us, and now we were on the map it wanted to redraw. The farmhouse became our temporary refuge. The high ridge it sat on overlooked the entire flooded marshland and the ruined harbor beyond it. From that vantage point, the ocean looked deceptively calm, blue-gray water stretching out, reflecting the weak sunlight. No enormous shadows rose, no pale limbs crawled, no massive vibrations shook the ground. To anyone arriving now, it would look like a bad storm had passed, but those of us who had seen what lived beneath the water knew better. Storms don't break boats into perfect circles. Storms don't crawl into towns through drainage channels. Storms don't hunt in silence. The deep thing had retreated for the moment, but not because it was gone. It was thinking, watching, remembering. A small community formed at the farmhouse by nightfall, maybe 30 people in total. The injured lay on mattresses brought from nearby homes. 2 teenage boys kept a fire going in an old metal drum. Farmers with shotguns stood along the ridge, scanning the marsh as if a shell of thick metal would stop whatever lived beneath the water. Inside, the living room became the planning room. Maps of the coastline were pulled from drawers and pinned to walls. Radios were lined up on the coffee table. Chairs formed a rough circle around Dallin, whose calm voice barely wavered as he tried to make sense of what little information we had. Keen and I sat by the window, watching the sun drop across the flooded fields. Dallin spoke up. "We need a plan for tonight. Whatever that thing is, it's active at night and quiet during the day. That's when predators hunt," someone said. "And when prey hides," another added. Keen rubbed his face. "Are we prey now?" "Everything on land is prey," someone muttered. "If it can crawl into the harbor, what stops it from crawling into town again?" Silence. A man seated near the fireplace stood. He was tall, built like a retired lumberjack with hands like shovels. I recognized him, Torrin Vale, owner of Vale's supply yard near the docks. He'd always been the kind of man who stared down storms just to prove he could. He cleared his throat. "We can't stay here forever. This hill buys us a little time, but if the thing comes inland again, we're cornered. We need to head farther north, maybe, toward the mountain roads." "And leave the whole town?" someone asked. Torrin looked at the floor. "Town's already gone." I saw Dallin's jaw tense. "We don't abandon people," he said. "If anyone's trapped, we go in daylight and get them." The room fell silent again. "What do you think, Roar?" Dallin asked suddenly, turning to me. I froze. Dozens of eyes shifted toward me. My chest tightened. I wasn't used to speaking to groups, especially not groups looking at me like I held answers. My voice cracked, so I cleared my throat. "I think whatever's hunting us learns quickly, faster than anything we've dealt with before." Keen nodded slowly. "It's using water pathways like roads," I continued. Harbor channels, marsh flows, drainage lines. It's not just passing through them, it's navigating, following vibrations, movements, it's thinking. Someone whispered, Jesus. I forced myself to keep going. If we stay in one place too long, it'll find us, especially if there's any standing water near or connected to the marsh or even underground. An older woman spoke up, but we're on high ground. High doesn't matter, I said. As long as there's water, any water, it has a path. That made the room mutter in fear. Torin crossed his arms. Then the only option is to move farther inland, away from every waterway, every marsh, every canal. That may not be enough, I said softly. Keen looked at me sharply. What does that mean? It followed Eldon home, I reminded him. Through tiny channels, through an inlet. It didn't need a river or a lake, it needed a trickle. Keen swallowed. So what? It can move through pipes now. Dallin answered quietly. If it's small enough or has pieces that break off, maybe. A chill spread through the room. We can't fight something like that, someone whispered. That was the truth, a heavy truth. I didn't want to say it, but everyone in that room felt it. We don't fight, Dallin said finally. We move, we warn anyone left, and we hope daylight slows it. After sunset, the farmhouse grew tense. Everyone kept lanterns low. No one wanted to draw attention. A cluster of survivors huddled around a candle on the porch, murmuring quietly. Children slept fitfully in the upstairs bedroom. The marsh below reflected the moonless sky, turning the land into a dark ocean stretching inward. Dallin organized shifts. Keen and I took first watch on the far side of the property, looking toward the flooded marsh where the deep thing had channeled its way inland. The night was too quiet, not gentle quiet, predator quiet. Keen stood beside me, arms wrapped around himself. Why isn't it doing anything? It's waiting, I murmured. For what? For movement, noise, heat, something alive. Keen's voice wavered. Roar, what if it remembers Eldon's voice, or his living room, or the sound of his truck? I forced a slow breath. Then we're already marked. Far off, something splashed, not close, not threatening, just a reminder. I raised my flashlight but kept it off. Keen's hands trembled. Roar, what if this is the last safe place, and when it finds us, he couldn't finish? We'll leave before that happens, I said. Leave where? Asked desperately. Where do we go? What if it can follow through groundwater, reservoirs, rivers? What if it can come up anywhere the sea touches? I didn't answer because I didn't know. Another splash echoed closer. Both of us stiffened. The sound wasn't directionless this time. It had purpose. Wait. A slow, deliberate movement through shallow water. Keen whispered, roar, roar, do you hear that? It's here, it's coming. I listened. The sound came again, splash, pause, splash, pause, slow, steady, rhythmic. Like footsteps, but impossible ones, too wide, too heavy, too soft at the same time. I scanned the marsh with squinting eyes. The faint moonlight reflected off shallow pools of water, turning the low ground into a mosaic of mirrors. Nothing moved, nothing visible at least, but the sound was real. I raised my flashlight. Keen grabbed my wrist. No, don't. If it sees the light. I'm not turning it on, I said. We crouched low. The splashes grew slower, then stopped. Absolute silence. My heart hammered. Keen's breath quickened. Roar if it's here, if it's close. A thump abruptly shook the earth beneath us. We both dropped to our knees. Another thump. Keen's voice cracked. It's under us, roar. It's moving under the ground. No, I said. Not under, through the water, under the soil, through the marsh, beneath the ridge. The ground vibrated faintly with each pulse. Not enough to break, just enough to transmit a message. I know where you are. Keen grabbed my shoulder. We need to tell Dallin now. We need to wake everyone. We ran toward the farmhouse, but halfway across the ridge I stopped suddenly because something made me stop. A sound unlike any we had heard before. A slow, deep inhalation, not through lungs, not through a mouth, a pulling sound, a suction. A wet, drawn-out breath rising from the marsh below, like the deep creature was breathing in the night air for the first time. Keen froze, eyes watering with terror. What is that? I didn't answer, because the truth wasn't something I wanted to say aloud. It wasn't just hunting anymore. It was searching, sensing, tasting, learning how land creatures lived, moved, breathed, preparing. Keen whispered, roar, it's adapting. I nodded, throat dry. A shadow rippled across the far edge of the marsh, then vanished. We ran, bursting into the farmhouse. We slammed the door shut, startling everyone inside. Dallin stood immediately. "What happened?" Keen gasped out the words, voice shaking. "It's here in the marsh, under the ridge. It's moving. It's learning." The room erupted with frightened murmurs. Dallin grabbed his radio, even though it had been dead earlier, and tried again. Static. He slammed it down. "We move at first light," he declared. "We head north toward the old quarry road, highest ground for miles." "Will it stop it?" someone asked. "No," Dallin said, "but it'll slow it, not stop it. Nothing could stop it, not yet. Not until we understood what it wanted. Not until we understood why it kept following us. Not until we knew what drove something from the deepest part of the ocean to crawl onto land." I lay awake that night, listening to the faint vibrations that rose through the floorboards. Not constant, not threatening, just aware, like a heartbeat under the earth, slow, patient. I finally accepted something we'd been avoiding since this began. The deep wasn't attacking our town, it was expanding its reach. And we were the first thing it recognized on land. Morning didn't feel like morning. It wasn't bright. It wasn't warm. It wasn't safe. It was a dull gray smear stretching across the sky, as if the sun itself had grown afraid to rise. The air tasted like wet metal. The marshland below the ridge still glistened with patches of standing water, some rippling gently, some perfectly still. Too still. A hunter's stillness. Inside the farmhouse, no one had slept. People packed whatever they could carry: blankets, canned food, first aid kits, small pets. Children were bundled in layers. Elders leaned on improvised walking sticks. Dallin and Torin coordinated the move with quiet urgency. "We leave in 20 minutes, Dallin told the room. "Stay together. No one wanders off. If you hear anything strange, anything at all, you don't investigate. You keep walking." People nodded, but fear made their movements stiff and hesitant. Every small noise made heads snap toward windows. Every vibration underfoot made the group hold their breath. Keen stood beside me as I checked the straps on my pack. His hands shook uncontrollably. "You think it knows we're leaving?" he whispered. I didn't want to answer, but lying wouldn't help. "Yes," I said softly. He swallowed. "Will it follow?" "Of course." He closed his eyes. "Why us roar? Why keep chasing us?" I thought of the pale crawler in Eldon's house, the massive shadow beneath the harbor, the way the deep creature rose whenever we tried to escape, the way it scanned us with that glowing seam. "It remembers us," I said. "It remembers our vibrations, our voices, our patterns. Maybe the pale thing marked us. Maybe the deep one senses what touched it. Maybe it sees us as the reason the surface changed. Or maybe," Keen whispered, "it just hates us." I didn't know, but the more I thought about it, the more one feeling twisted inside me. We had disturbed the deep, and the deep was disturbed back. By the time the survivors gathered outside the farmhouse, the sky darkened again, thick clouds rolling in from the west. A storm wasn't coming, yet the air felt charged, heavy, expectant. Not a storm, a shift. Dallin stood at the front of the group, shotgun slung over his shoulder. Torin and a handful of other locals flanked the sides. Keen and I stayed in the middle, not because we wanted protection, but because we knew the deep thing reacted to movement and noise. We didn't want to be the first or last in line. The narrow road leading from the ridge stretched northward through farmland and old forest patches. If we followed it long enough, we'd reach the mountain roads, long, winding paths above all waterways, above the deep's reach. At least that was the hope. "Stay quiet," Dallin said. "We don't know how far the thing can hear." We began our slow descent down the ridge. Gravel crunched under boots. Breath misted in the cold air. Children clutched their parents. Dogs whimpered. Every sound felt too loud in the silence. And beneath it all, the ground vibrated, faint, barely noticeable, but there. Keen leaned close. "It's moving." "I know." We reached the base of the ridge where the marshland met open field. The road curved gently, bordered by tall reeds on one side and a series of shallow drainage ditches on the other. Reeds rustled, though there was no wind. Dallin raised a hand to halt the group. Everyone froze. I scanned the ditch. Nothing at first. Then the water surface trembled. A faint ripple spread from the center outward. Another ripple, then stillness. Dallin whispered, "Keep moving, quietly." We walked again, though the dread in my chest grew heavier. The deeper we traveled, the more obvious the vibrations became. Tiny pulses through the dirt, quiet thumps through the ground. A sense of pressure building beneath us, like something massive was shifting below the soil. Keen kept glancing down. "It's under the marsh." "It's been under the marsh," I said. "Night." That's when the first scream ripped through the group. A woman near the back stumbled into the road, pointing toward the flooded marshland behind us. What is that?" she shrieked. Everyone turned. The water in the far marsh was rising slowly, silently, forming a long, narrow dome stretching 10, 20, maybe 30 feet across. It wasn't rising high, just enough to distort the surface, just enough to reveal a moving shape beneath. A shape that was tracking us. "Move," Dallin yelled. "Up the road." "Gio," the group surged forward, no longer caring about silence. Boots pounded dirt. A child cried. Someone dropped a bag and didn't stop to pick it up. Keen grabbed my sleeve. "It's following our path." "Run," I said. We fled up the road toward the forest stretch. Trees loomed ahead, thin pines, their branches high above the ground. The road cut through them like a narrow spine. We reached the tree line just as the marsh behind us erupted. Water sprayed upward in a long, arcing burst. The dome collapsed into a wide ripple. Something enormous rolled beneath the surface, smooth, fluid, terrifyingly controlled. It didn't breach, it didn't strike, it simply followed, like a predator pacing its prey from below. The forest canopy offered a strange comfort, twisted shadows, branches scraping above us, the earthy smell of pine needles. At least here there was no open water, but that didn't mean we were safe. A thin stream cut through the woods, snaking between the trunks. Not deep. Maybe a foot or two, but it moved with an unnatural rhythm. Too steady, too controlled, too aware. The ground beside the stream pulsed. Keen clutched my arm so hard his nails dug through my jacket. "It's using the stream, it's using every piece of water it can find." Dallin shouted for everyone to stay away from the banks. People squeezed together on the dry central road. That's when we heard it, not the splash of water, not the vibration of the earth, but breathing. A slow, deep inhalation coming from the stream, almost like a sigh, long, drawn out, wet. The stream bulged upward slightly. All at once, 4 pale limbs burst out. Long, thin, jointed, not the massive creature, but smaller versions, crawlers. At least 5 of them spilled onto the muddy bank, their bodies writhing like blind insects. Their skin stretched taut over bone. Their limbs folded like bent reeds. And though they had no eyes, they turned toward the group as if sensing heat. Children screamed. Adults backed away. Someone swung a shovel, someone else slipped. The crawlers scuttled forward suddenly, too fast, too coordinated. Dallin fired his shotgun into the ground ahead of them. The blast echoed through the forest. The crawlers recoiled, limbs snapping backward, retreating toward the water. But the shotgun blast had a worse consequence. The ground vibrated harder, deeper, like something was responding, answering. Keen choked out, "You just told it where we are." Dallin cursed. I had no choice. The stream trembled violently. Something beneath it surged forward at alarming speed, sending waves up the bank. The crawlers skittered aside. The stream widened as if stretching. The deep thing was coming. Closer, faster, through the narrow channel. Torin yelled, "Run!" We ran again, deeper into the forest, broader along the twisting road. The children cried. Adults shouted. The earth beneath us thumped like a heartbeat. Every few seconds, the stream shook, water spraying out as something massive plowed through it, deforming the channel walls. It wasn't stuck. It wasn't struggling. It was forcing the stream wider as it followed. The forest thinned ahead, opening toward a broad clearing. Dallin reached it first and waved everyone through. "Keep going, to high ground." But when I reached the clearing's edge and looked down, my breath caught. The forest floor dipped sharply into a bowl-shaped valley. The bottom lay a shallow lake, one that hadn't been there the day before. The storm runoff had gathered there overnight, forming a long stretch of still water, directly connected to the stream behind us. Keen stared in horror. "We can't cross that." "We have to," Dallin yelled. "It's the only path north. It'll reach us," Keen yelled. "It'll pull us under." The vibrations grew stronger, traveling up through the ground like warning signals. The deep thing was nearly here. The crawlers were chittering behind us. Water surged in the stream. Trees shook as something huge displaced soil beneath them. Time ran out. Dallin made the decision. "We circle the lake," he shouted. "The north edge, there's a ridge, move." We sprinted along the lake's curve. Mud splashed, the ground sucked at our boots. The water beside us remained still, too still, as if holding its breath. Something moved beneath it, huge, shadowy, growing clearer. Children were lifted and carried. Elderly were dragged by the arms. Bags were abandoned. The sound erupted behind us. A roar combined with a deep bass note like a mountain shifting underwater. Trees fell. Branches cracked. The stream exploded upward as something enormous entered the lake's water. I looked, and I saw it. A massive dark shape rising like a submerged island, not fully exposed, not even half. Just a curved segment, a smooth, monolithic arc of muscle and unknown material that displaced the entire lake's surface. It moved with slow precision, cutting through the water silently. Not thrashing, not striking, tracking. Its glowing seam opened, that long, horizontal line brightening like an enormous single red eye, scanning, finding us. Keen screamed, "Run, run now." We surged up the ridge, feet slipping, hands grabbing at roots and stones. The lake behind us churned violently as the creature moved closer, the water spiraling inward, as if being pulled into its massive form. We scrambled up the hill as the glowing slit brightened behind us like a hungry sunrise. When we reached the top, panting, shaking, the creature stopped. Not because it couldn't continue, but because it was learning, watching, waiting. As if realizing something, we would keep running, and it would keep following. The deep had claimed land now, and we were running out of land to claim back. Underneath the ridge, the world was changing in ways I'd never thought possible. The creature didn't rush us like a shark. It didn't roar like a whale. It moved the earth with a patience that made the night feel younger and older at once. When it stopped, everything around it seemed to hold its breath. When it moved, the ground remembered the way it trembled. We reached the top of the ridge and didn't speak for a long time. People circled like animals who had survived a hunter's first pass, shaking, eyes wet, hands that trembled when they tried to soothe a child. The farmhouse smoke curled up faint and gray behind us. The ridge offered a small pocket of safety, but even the pine trees seemed unnerved, their needles rustling without wind. Dallin gathered people and spoke in a voice that had become the map we were all following, low, practical, trying to turn terror into motion. "We can't stay here forever," he said. "We move at dawn toward the old logging road. It climbs into the hills away from the marsh grid. We'll set watches, we'll ration, we'll carry the injured, we leave at first light. No one goes alone." Torin set up teams to prepare the carts. Women packed bread and water. Old men checked knives and guns. The children sat in a line and chewed strips of jerky like it was candy. The little comforts felt precious and fragile. That night, nothing stayed quiet for long. The deep thing hadn't fully retreated. It circled and tested the water like a farmer testing soil for frost. Sometimes the marsh would stir in long, slow rolls and nothing obvious would come up. Sometimes the surface would pull back and leave a hollow ring on floating debris like a thumbprint. Every test made everyone jump. Keen and I took a watch together on a fallen log at the edge of the clearing. The sky was thin and starless. My breath fogged in front of me like a small ghost. "You think it sleeps?" Keen asked, voice too small for the wide dark. "No," I said. "It learns while it's still." He laughed without humor. "That's worse." The forest below bled wet noises, small splashes, a distant dragging, the occasional chitter of something small that skittered through brush. The crawlers had started to appear in numbers now, slipping up bank sides and riding currents into new channels. They were small, horribly small, but in groups they gave the impression of a mind spread into many bodies. If the big thing was a hunter, these were its scouts. the little teeth at the edge of a mouth waiting to taste the place. At 3 in the morning, after the world had bled through 2 hours of silence, a sound came across the marsh that stopped my blood. Low at first, as if a giant were breathing through cupped hands. Then higher, like an old radio finding a frequency and locking on. It was the sound Eldon's radio had made the night he was taken, the panic, the snaps of static, and then under it a voice so thin I almost thought I imagined it. "Roar," it said. My head snapped toward the sound. Keen's hand went cold in mine. It wasn't a voice anyone else could have mistaken. It had been months and miles and a million terrible things since I'd last heard Eldon speak in that way. But there was his cadence, his low, practical drawl, even the pause he made before he swore. The hair on my arms rose until my jacket felt too tight. Keen whispered, "That's him, right? That's Eldon." I couldn't say. No one could swear something like that. The first voice the deep mimicked might be coincidence or a trick of the radio or the brain's desperate kindness. But my chest tightened with the knowledge that if it was him, he might still be down there in some form. Or worse, someone using his voice to lure us. The voice came again, softer. "If you're listening, don't come north. Don't take the highway. Go inland, west, toward the ridge's old quarry road. It's higher, it's safer." It was advice we needed. It was also exactly the kind of lure you'd expect a thing that hunted by memory to spin. Dallin shot a look at me. His eyes were hollow circles but sharp with command. "Are you sure this is?" I put my hand on the radio box that sat in the farmhouse cart, the one Dallin had managed to keep working an hour earlier. It had sputtered since then, throwing up words and static and sometimes scraps of voices from other channels. "It could be a recording," I said, "or corrupted echo, or somebody broadcasting on an open channel that heard what happened to Eldon." Keen's breath shook. "Do you think it's trying to split us?" "Every predator splits," I said. "Every pack leader tries to thin the herd. If it can learn our voices and our patterns, it can make choices that hurt us." Dallin swallowed hard. "If it's Eldon, then he's in there. If it's not, then the voice is bait," he said. "We don't have a choice but to leave either way. We move at first light, west to the quarry road. We stick to groups. Radio's off unless it's our signal. No one answers outside calls." People nodded, the way someone agrees to a wound you can't heal. They packed the few things they could carry, and one by one they forced themselves to sleep in shifts. We moved at an hour when fog still held the ground like wool. The march was a ragged line, tired faces, packs heavy with more memories than supplies. The forest around us smelled like pine and rot and old rain. With each step we left the scattered houses behind, the houses whose porches had become places to be torn and whose chimneys still smoked like old grudges. The road climbed. It narrowed. The way rose between shallow ridges where the stupid little streams tried to braid the bed into new channels. Kids stumbled and were picked up. Old men groaned. The group became a living river of fear and determination. At midday, halfway up the old quarry road, the line halted. Torin, always the one to push forward, stood at the front, hands shading his eyes. He pointed. Down below, a handful of boats that had been abandoned days ago now formed a black crown in the water. A new wake had cut through the harbor and threaded behind them like a snake. Below the water, the creature patrolled. It was further away than before, closer to where boats lay broken, closer to the shore. But it had learned to ride currents and wait at choke points. Those abandoned boats were like markers. Whatever the thing used to count the land had found new anchors for its memory. "It's watching the river mouth," Torin said. "Like it knows we'll try to head east or south." Keen cursed. "That means it'll see any movement on the water." Dallin rubbed his jaw. He never looked harder than he did in that moment, like every map in his mind was trying to rearrange itself. "We move on foot through the pines," he decided. "No lines, no headlights. We use the old logging paths that run thin along the ridge. Keep the small groups together." Which they did, walking like ghosts between the saplings. We skirted the water as best we could, staying higher and keeping to the drier dirt. But the deeper we went, the more the ground told us stories. The prints of the crawlers, the small drag lines where something slick had been pulled, the odd thin gouges on tree bark as if something with webbed fingers had been practicing hands on wood. Folks began to talk in whispers of things they'd lost. A neighbor named Hargreaves had been taken from his skiff at dawn 2 days prior, his hat now drifted in the tall grass. A teenage boy, Cal, cried when he found his dog's collar wrapped around a broken pier piling. We carried these losses like pebbles, small, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Around dusk, we reached the old quarry. It was a hollow place, rock walls folded down like a sleeping jaw. We edged along the rim, hoping to find shelter among broken stone. There was a small group of trucks clustered there, farm trucks that had made it off the marsh. People huddled, faces leaner, hands working the small fires. Oil lamps flickered like a stubborn crop of stars. We put out our packs, knelt, and breathed. For a moment, the whole world felt fragile and human, people sharing pieces of food and stories that disguised despair as normal conversation. Children played quietly with a battered soccer ball. Then, without a sound except for a soft rip, the quarry water bulged. Not a wave as we know it, but a slow, purposeful rise as something massive shoved at the stone faces below, testing the basin. The surface shook and a ripple cracked across it like a fist scraping a drum. Keen's hand found mine. "It's here," he mouthed. Dallin's face went hard. "We can't stay. If it finds the quarry basin, it can trap us down here. It uses basins like pockets." Torin barked orders. We move at dawn again. We circle the ridge and no one sleeps along the edge. We all pretended we could accept that. We laid our sleeping bags further from the rim. We pulled the kids close. We watched the water like a wound we were afraid to touch. That night I dreamed of the deep as a slow animal with too many teeth. I woke before dawn because fish were banging against the side of an abandoned skiff someone had tied near the basin rim. When I shuffled outside, the water sent up a faint sound that was almost a laugh. We left the quarry the next day under a sky that had been tempered by fear into a dull, sober blue. We walked in tighter groups. People watched their backs. Kids fell asleep against pack straps. Old men walked like they were trying to remember a safer life. Toward noon, the radio on Dallin's truck cracked and held a voice that was Eldon's and wasn't anyone I recognized. It was thin, with an odd cadence like someone reading a naval forecast backward. The words were patchy, but one phrase cut through the static that still made up most of the broadcast. "Don't stop. Patterns, sound, it learns, move west." We all looked up at once, heads swiveling like a flock. The radio cut out. Keen's head dropped. "It speaks in our language now," he said. "It uses what we know to make what it wants more likely." "Then we have to become unpredictable," I said, but the words felt small. How do you become unpredictable when terror already makes your feet move in the same direction as everyone else's? The road ahead swept into broken country. The hills rose. The last safe line into the highland cut like a throat across the map. We pushed on. At dusk on the western ridge, the summons arrived. A low vibration. A sound like 1,000 stones rolling. A push in the earth that made the tree line tremble. The deep thing had found us again. We all stopped. The forest stood still. For one stretched heartbeat, we were suspended, waiting to see what would happen next. Then it did something we hadn't seen before. From the hollow below, a slow, wide curve of dark moved upward. The seam along its flank glowed faint red, not a glare this time, but a slow pulsing like a hand tapping a rhythm. It rose, not toward the quarry, but along the water's veins that fed the landscape. It rose like a tide hungry for memory and picking up the scent of our steps. This time, as it moved, its seam pulsed in an odd cadence, not random, not senseless. It pulsed like it was calling, like it was making a sound pattern we could not translate. Then, low and clear through the trees, we heard as if from a great distance the voice of someone we loved saying one simple, ordinary thing: "Come back." We did not. We could not. But the deep would keep asking. And it would not stop until we either answered on its terms, or it taught us what answer it wanted.